Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has Senju and Uzumaki clan bloodline. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Malik Uzumaki 18 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 001, A New Beginning. Beep beep beep. Naruto Uzumaki groaned as he sat up. He used his right hand and smashed his toad-shaped alarm clock that was blinking the time in its neon orange lights. He let out a sigh as he saw the time. 6:30. He got off his bed and stretched. He then looked around his messy room and smiled. Today was the day. Ladies and gentlemen, today wasn't any random day, no, today was the day Naruto Uzumaki took his training seriously. Not more than 6 hours ago he had defeated a Chunin from stealing a scroll that belonged to the Hokage. Konoha's forbidden scroll filled with thousands on top of thousands of jutsu, all either S-classed, A-classed or B-classed genjutsu that were powerful and most likely deadly. Naruto had had a long talk with the Sandaime Hokage yesterday, and through some long discussion the Sandaime Hokage had convinced Naruto to eat healthier. Read. Forced. They also had a long argument over what Naruto wore. The Hokage had explained that orange could have gotten him killed during a mission. And when all else failed, Hiruzen told Naruto he would ban orange from Konoha. Read. Threatened. Then there was the fact that Naruto had no training in anything whatsoever. The only thing he was good in was stealth due to his limitless hours upon hours of outrunning and hiding from Anbu after pulling pranks. Naruto grumbled as he remembered why he had to wake up at this kami-forsaken hour. He grumbled and took out one of his rusty and dull kunai. Using the dull edge he pried open a loose floorboard. Once the floorboard was discarded he took out a box that was underneath. The box was 12 inches in length, 6 inches in width and 8 inches in height. It had a lock on it. Naruto got up and ran into his bathroom. He removed the top of the toilet where a key was hidden next to the pump. He smirked as he took the key and placed the top back on. He then went back to the chest and slipped the key in. It opened with a click. Inside the chest was some money, some cup raiment, medical supplies and surprisingly clothes that weren't orange. He took everything out and placed it onto his bed. He went into the kitchen and brought back out some newly purchased raiment and placed it into the box. He locked it back and placed it back within the floorboard. He took a hammer and some nails, and minutes later the floorboard was back to its normal leverage, mostly. He took off his jumpsuit and went into the shower. 10 minutes later he came back out with a towel wrapped around his waist. He quickly brushed his teeth and went back into his room. Once in his room he slipped on his boxers, which was orange with green toads on it. He slipped on the clothes he had in the box and wrapped some bandages around him. The clothes consisted of a black onesie that was tight but not too tight as to look like those green freaks of nature he had seen. It was slightly baggy. It also had a hoodie which obstructed his features well. His blonde hair, blue eyes and 3 whisker marks per cheek were not seen. The bandages were wrapped around both of his shins, on his right thigh where a kunai and shuriken pouch was. There were also bandages around his forearms. A white Konohagakure leaf symbol was on his chest, while the Uzumaki clan insignia was on both his left shoulder, while a strange insignia was on his right shoulder. The sign on his right shoulder was a black line in a horizontal direction, it had a black line in the middle facing vertically. On either end of the horizontal line was strange symbols seemingly repelling each other. The Senju clan insignia. Unfortunately or fortunately how you look at it, Naruto knew not what it was. He shrugged it off and decided to ask the Hokage about it when he went. He slipped on his black shinobi sandals and his blue-clothed headband, deciding to change it to black later on. He then slipped the money in his pocket and left via the window, but not before leaving some shadow clones to clean up the place. Today was going to be a long day. He just knew it. Hokage's office, Hokage Tower. He pushed open the Hokage's double doors without even knocking, rinsed the old man engrossed in reading his perverted orange book. That's when he got a malicious idea. And it was perfect seeing as Hiruzen hadn't sensed his entry. Sexy jutsu. He thought, and in a small cloud of smoke a new figure stood there. This was a girl, no, a young woman, she was about the age of 16, had size DT size breasts and was naked, her innocence and assets protected by floating clouds of smoke. Hokage-sama. She breathed out in a seductive tone. Hiruzen just glanced at her and was immediately caught with blood pouring down her nose like the falls at Tokigakure. Minutes later Hiruzen woke up with a groan. He opened an eye to see Naruto reading his book. Hiruzen snatched the book out of his hand and glared at the young boy. This is not for children your age. Hiruzen stated as he placed the book away. Naruto sighed and reclined in his seat as he placed his hands behind his head. What's the sign on the clothes you gave me? Naruto said, indicating to his shoulder. It was the truth, Hiruzen had given him the clothes when he was 8, stating that he could only wear it when he became a shinobi. Did anyone notice? Hiruzen asked, not even answering his question. When Naruto shook his head he continued. Good, I don't want the village to know just yet. Hiruzen explained. What is it, old man? Your clan insignia. Hiruzen said with a sigh. You are from two shinobi clans, the Uzumaki clan and the Senju clan. He explained and smirked at Naruto's gaping face. The two shinobi clans? He asked and Hiruzen nodded. Am I the last of both? Hiruzen's face fell as this was a question he wanted to avoid. Come on, would you want to tell an orphan that his only known living relative wants nothing to do with him? No. Hiruzen said and Naruto jumped in his seat pumping his fist in the air. He then went on to ask question on top of question getting Hiruzen irritated. Enough. The silence that filled the room after that was deafening. Naruto looked at Hiruzen with shock written all over his face as he saw a lone tear escape the Hokage's eyes. Sorry. Naruto apologized. Can you please tell me about them? Sure. Hiruzen said with a small smile. There are a few Uzumakis scattered across the elemental nations and there is one senju alive. He stated and Naruto was listening with rapt attention. One more senju? He muttered under his breath. Where is he? Hiruzen sighed. She wants nothing to do with you? Hiruzen said and watched as Naruto's face fell. He then noticed Naruto was crying and walked over to him. She has a good reason. He said placing a hand on his shoulder. What is it? Do you remember the Yondaime Hokage? Hiruzen asked and received a nod from Naruto. She was his mother, she blamed you for killing him because he risked his life to seal the nine tails in you, but that wasn't all. Hiruzen said and Naruto turned to him his eyes red from crying. Your mother was like a daughter to her. Those words stopped Naruto's tears dead in their tracks as his wide blue and red eyes stared up at his grandfather figure. Shock evident in his features. My mother? He stuttered and Hiruzen nodded as he went back to his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a picture of a busty blonde woman and a red-haired woman with a round face and long hair. He handed it to Naruto. The redhead is your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, the woman is Tsunade Senju, they were like mother and daughter, but he said making Naruto look at him. Your mother was the previous Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, and during childbirth the seal that keeps the fox at bay weakened severely, your father tried desperately to hold it back, but he failed resulting in the Yondaime risking his life. So? He said making Hiruzen inspect him closer. She blames me for being born? He asked and watched as Hiruzen nodded glumly making Naruto smirk which shocked the shit out of Hiruzen. What are you smirking about? I'll just have to prove to her that I wasn't a mistake and that I'll live up to be Kachan's and Tusen's legacy. He said with a grin as he fist pumped into the air. Hiruzen smiled and thanked Kami that Naruto didn't ask who his father was. Who was my father? Hiruzen's face turned from one of happiness to one of sadness immediately. I am not at liberty to tell you, however, I will make it known that you are the last member of one of Konoha's founding clans in the village. He said and Naruto's jaw dropped. Look old man, I'll be back, I have a lot of studying to do, didn't know anything about either of my clans, and I'm going to find out everything I can about my mother and Tsunade Sentabeo. He exclaimed as he turned around and froze in his tracks. What is it? I don't think I have enough money to buy what I need. He said and deflated to which Hiruzen chuckled. Just go, I transferred quarter of the Senju clan's money into your account, well you have all of your mother's money. Hiruzen said and Naruto's mood returned to eccentric. By the way, I'll be back to find out what I can about my mother from you. He said with narrowed eyes as he left through the window. Hiruzen chuckled and hoped Naruto would never leave via the window again. He did not want another coming of Kushina or Jiraiya. Oh, the pain, it would definitely kill him. He sighed once again as he assembled some Anbu to gather the council in 2 hours. He then pulled back out his Icha book and began reading, perverted giggles followed suit soon afterwards. Library, Konohagakure. Naruto entered the library with his and waved to the library. It was funny how the librarian was one of the only few people who actually didn't want to rip his guts out. She flashed him a smile, then noticed the Senju logo and called him over. Yes? He asked. I see Hokage-sama told you about your clan. She said shocking Naruto. Before you ask, I knew as I was good friends with your mother and father. She said and Naruto perked up at that. Can you tell me about my father please, the old man only told me about my mother. He begged and the woman drew in a breath and patted Naruto on his head. Sorry Naruto-kun, no can do, Hiruzen-sama would have my head. She told him. He pouted. Go and get what you need, I'll personally check you out. She urged. He pouted but nodded and dashed to go search the library. 10 minutes later he returned with 11 books. 2 on chakra control, 1 on the elements of ninjutsu, 2 on the history of Konoha, 1 on the history of the Uzumaki clan, 1 on the Senju clan, 1 on the basics of a ninja, 1 on how to properly throw weapons, the last 2 were on Fuinjutsu and Kinjutsu. In the talk the previous morning the Hokage had practically ordered him to buy these as it was in relation to one of his clans. The librarian sighed and checked up on the books. Would you like to buy or rent them? She asked and Naruto's jaw dropped. I can buy books from the library. He asked and she sighed. Once it isn't on the history of shinobis themselves. She said with a shrug. Give me a minute. He said and disappeared into the back of the library. He came back out with a smaller orange-covered book. She saw the book and glared at it. Naruto chuckled nervously as she rang him up, all the while glaring at him. She sealed all of the contents in a scroll and let out a long-drawn sigh. If Kushina finds out that I let her son buy that perverted filth, she'd kill me. She muttered under her breath, but Naruto heard her and wondered how dangerous his mother was. He waved goodbye and left. Ninja store, Kanehagakure. Naruto entered the ninja store to see a young girl with 2 buns in her head. She had on a Link Chinese-style shirt and Treen ninja pants. Naruto walked up and touched her shoulder. "Excuse," he said meekly, hoping she wouldn't kick him out of the store. She turned around to face him and smiled. "How?" she exclaimed, touching his whisker marks, making him blush. She restrained herself from tackling him and playing with his whisker marks and cleared her throat with an embarrassed blush. "Hi, I'm Tenten, what can I do you for?" she asked with stars in her eyes. "I was wondering if I could buy some ninja equipment," he answered, and she nodded happily. "Sure, you can buy anything once you have the money for it, so what would you like?" she asked. "And I have an order of 2,000 white kunai, I want them slightly shorter than the others with red wrappings around the handle, 2,006 bladed shuriken, some paper bombs, smoke bombs, flash bombs, some chakra weights, 100 meters in chakra wire, and I would also like some clothes," he answered. She eyes him up and down. "What's with a weird kunai and shuriken?" "I was just thinking of something different, I want to be like the yondaime," he exclaimed. "Well, you can have everything now and return for the weapons later, but you will need to tell me what kind of clothes you want," she explained, and he nodded in understanding. He explained in fine detail what kind of clothes he wanted and the 2 clan signs on the shoulders. He paid for it up front and left with everything except the clothes and weapons, as the weapons needed to be made and the clothes needed the insignias sewn on. She placed everything else in a scroll and told him to return in 2 days, to which he nodded. As soon as he walked, he bumped into an Anbu who told him Hiruzen requested his presents. He nodded and the Anbu placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder and disappeared with him. Earlier, Kanehagakure council room. Hiruzen smiled as the last of his council arrived, and on time at that. He cleared his throat as he eyes each and every one of them carefully. All of them paid their full attention. To the left of the table was the clan heads of the following clans: Hyuga, Inyazuka, Aburam, Yamanaka, Amamichi, Nara, and the empty spot for the Senju and Uchiha. To his right were 8 civilians that made up a civilian council, and at the other end of the table was his longtime rival and 2 old teammates. "You were all summoned here for a reason," Hiruzen stated. "What's the reason?" a civilian asked, making everyone sweat drop, like literally. Was he that stupid? "The reason is to discuss the future of the Senju clan," he said, and all heads shot to him. He inwardly smirked at the shocked face on Danzo. "Do tell." Danzo responded almost instantly. "We have had the second heir for the Senju clan among us for 12 years. He said, shocking them further. "Due to his parents' request, his heritage was kept secret until recently, and before you decide to do anything in order to stop me from making my decision, I will personally deal with you." All of them shuddered at that, but out of all of them only one man had it all figured it out as he let out a chuckle. All heads turned to him, Shikaku Nara. "What's wrong, Shikaku?" his friend, Choza Akamichi, asked. "It's troublesome," he said, making everyone groan at his laziness. "It's been right under our noses since the beginning, I'm surprised no one else figured it out," he said, and Hiruzen smirked slightly. "Who is it?" Danzo asked, only to be met with a chuckle from Hiruzen. Ma Danzo, he'll be here shortly, I sent an Anbu for him," Hiruzen said. Danzo leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Fine then. I have already made the necessary arrangements. He will be moved into the Senju compound and have access to 1/4 of the Senju clan funds, as he is not the first heir," he said. The other nodded. "So he's a good shinobi, we should have our best jonin train him alongside Sasuke," Nobuki said, and was shocked at the cold chuckle Hiruzen let out. They turned to him. "When he gets here we'll make our decision," Hiruzen said, and the others nodded. 5 minutes later there was a shunshin, and an Anbu appeared with a figure that made everyone's eyes, except Shikaku's, grow wide. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hiruzen began with a chuckle. "I present to you, Naruto Uzumaki Senju. Chapter 002, the beginning of training. How can you possibly associate this filth with one of Konoha's founding clans?" a civilian asked, jumping up and pointing an accusing finger at Naruto, who groaned. The other civilians began to argue with Hiruzen, saying how either the demon should not be associated with the Senju clan and it's a lie, he's a demon. Truth be told, Naruto was getting annoyed inside. He turned to Hiruzen, who seemed to be almost on the brink of a mental breakdown. Naruto cleared his throat. They still began to quarrel. The shinobi sighed and the elders were simply staring at him. He blushed from the attention and passed a hand through his blonde locks. "Honorable Council," he said. No answer. A tick mark appeared on his forehead in anger from being ignored. He glanced at Hiruzen, who was just resting his head in his arm that was propped by his elbow. "Enough," Naruto yelled, silencing the council. They turned to him and glared, making him sweat a little. He was about to apologize when Hiruzen spoke up. "Thank you, Naruto," Hiruzen said, then turned to the council. All of whom stared right back at him with disdain. The shinobi were at least reasonable with the situation, while he felt Danzo and his teammates would snap at any minute. Hiruzen gave a nod of his head, signalizing them to begin their question in an orderly fashion and don't ask random shit. The first civilian to speak was a pink-haired woman. "Okazama, I am sure the rest of the council like myself wishes for proof, particularly a blood test," she said, and Hiruzen turned to Naruto and let out a chuckle. Hiruzen took out a scroll from his Hokage robes and unsealed the contents. Out came a file. Inside the folder was one sheet of paper. It was a blood test. He smirked as he passed it around. It lingered by his teammates and rival longer than tells others, but he made no comment. Once the file had returned to its confines in the scroll, Hiruzen placed it back into his pocket and cleared his throat. He took a sip of his water and turned to Naruto. "The blood test was done with blood from my past student, Tsunade Senju and Naruto-kun," Hiruzen stated. "It was determined that he is either a cousin or first cousin." "So, who are his parents?" Kaharu Udatane asked. Naruto's attention was now fully on Hiruzen, whose eyes lazily gazed towards Naruto, and then he smirked. "His mother was Kushina Uzumaki, and his father was sorry Naruto I'm not telling you," Hiruzen said, making Naruto and the rest of the council face fault. "I don't understand, Hokage-sama," Hiashi said with a sweat drop. "Well, Naruto is a smart boy," Hiruzen explained. "I want him to figure out who his father is by himself." Naruto groaned and placed a hand on his chin and began to think. Hiruzen snickered, then noticed that one of the clan heads was eyeing Naruto carefully. The man watched Hiruzen, then glanced to the picture of the yondaime in the corner of the room. Hiruzen only gave a slight nod. The man smirked, rather lazily I might add. He reclined in his chair and gazed at Naruto. Naruto threw his hands up in frustration. Hiruzen chuckled at the scene. "Please tell me, old man," Naruto pleaded, but Hiruzen only shook his head. Naruto grumbled something incoherent and then turned to look at the council, then back at the Hokage. "Can we get back on track here? I have a lot of training to do," Naruto said, a little irritated. "Well, there's nothing much more to say, and Anbu will meet you later tonight to move your things into the Senju compound," Hiruzen told him. Naruto sighed and pointed to the door, asking if he could go. Hiruzen nodded and Naruto turned and off, rather irritated and confused as to why Hiruzen wouldn't just tell him who his father was. Damn. He had a lot of research to do. Later. Training ground 2, Konohagakure. Naruto stretched and worked out some kinks in his back and neck. He sighed as he sat cross-legged in the center of the clearing and lay back on his back, taking in the fresh air. He took in his surroundings of the training ground and smiled. It had a waterfall behind him. He was surrounded by lush trees and a wooden stump in the middle of the grounds. He let out another sigh as he stood up and unsealed the contents of his scroll, only to hear his stomach growl. He made 2 clones and sent them for Raymond. He took up the first book he saw, which happened to be a book on chakra control, and began to read. But, before he could start, his stomach growled again, making him punch it. He sighed and began to read. Chapter 1, Basics of Chakra. Chakra is the power that shinobis use to do various nin, gen, tai, kin, ken, fuin, bo and boku jutsu. Each jutsu uses some form of chakra for the various forms and/or activities. Ninjutsu. Ninjutsu or ninja techniques is the ability to incorporate chakra into techniques. There are 5 elements that ninjutsu can be derived from: fire, wind, lightning, earth and water. These are called affinities. They can be tested by chakra paper. Affinities also have betters and leaders. Fire is stronger than wind, which is stronger than lightning, lightning is stronger than earth, and earth is stronger than water. Genjutsu. Genjutsu or illusionary techniques is the ability to trap people in fake worlds. Genjutsu requires good stealth, a lot of chakra control and small chakra reserves. There are many ways to do genjutsus. The Sharingan is able to cast and break genjutsu. Genjutsu can also be cast by hand seals. Ninjutsu can be broken by 3 means: disrupting chakra flow, forcing chakra into the target in pain. Taijutsu. Taijutsu or body techniques is the ability to fight hand-to-hand combats. Chakra can also be incorporated into this type of fighting by using the 5 elements. You can add any elements into a punch or kick to increase the effect of the hit, causing more damage. Kinjutsu. Kinjutsu or forbidden techniques are techniques that are not open to the public. Only certain shinobis can have access to forbidden techniques, as some cause harm to both the user and the victim. Certain kinjutsus can kill the user and target, cause internal or external damage to the user while harming the target, and some can cause mental breakdowns from overuse. Kinjutsu. Kinjutsu or sword techniques are techniques that requires a sword. Chakra can be mixed with the slices and dices of a sword to add extra effect and sharpness to the blade, making it easier to kill. Swords are to be taken care of and kept in pristine condition in order to avoid rust or dents of the blade. Fuinjutsu. Fuinjutsu or sealing techniques are when paper and sealing ink is used to form a variety of seals for different purposes. There are 50 sealing levels. A seal's difficulty is based on the level. It can also be removed by a sealing practitioner of a higher level. Bajutsu. Bajutsu or staff techniques is the ability to use staffs to a great proportion. Chakra can be added to the swings of a staff just like a sword, but the damage would be less because swords are sharp and staffs are not. Bakujutsu. Bakujutsu or weapon techniques is the ability to throw countless of weapons easily and without too many complications. Bakujutsu practitioners can also be skilled in ken and bojutsu, as those are forms of weapons. Chakra can be used to control weapons with chakra wire. Naruto groaned as he finished the first page of the book. It was easy enough to understand, but he only had a month and he could read out those entire books in a month. He was about to continue when he froze. He looked around and raised a brow. He just had a feeling he was in hot water. He turned to his left when he was a wet clone running with 2 bowls of ramen. What happened? Naruto asked standing up. The clone placed the ramen takeout bowls on the ground and began to pant with hands on knees. He then looked the original dead in the eye. We were running through Konoha when a civilian tripped the other clone, all the ramen spilled, and I was only able to save 2 bowls. It answered with a pant. Shadow clones get tired? Naruto asked and the clone stopped dead in its tracks as well. It scratched its head and looked around sheepishly. It turned to the original to see him sweating madly. It's because you're sweating, we feel what you feel I think. It is explained and Naruto passed his palm on his forehead to see he was indeed sweating. He made another clone and sent it into the trees to play rock paper scissors with the other. He told them to play until one wins then disperse. They nodded and left. 2 minutes later Naruto found out the new clone had lost after 6 drawn games, which made Naruto get a wicked smirk. He filled the training grounds with clones. It was at least 500 clones. I want all of you to break into groups of 100. Naruto explained and they did so. He made 5 more clones and had each stand in front of a group. You will all do what the leader says and I will tell you when to disperse as to not kill me. Naruto said remembering the phrase about mental breakdowns. Naruto had a short conversation with the clones and had decided that 2 from each group would read out the books except his Icha while the others practiced either chakra control, fuinjutsu, taijutsu, kinjutsu katas with sticks and meditating. He was only doing the last one because of what Hiruzen had told him about meditation was a good way to clear your mind. So Naruto ate his 2 bowls of ramen and waited for the next 8 hours to pass. Meanwhile, Hokage's office, Hokage Tower. A figure jumped through one of the many windows in the Hokage's office. He glanced around to see the Hokage reading an orange-covered book, which made him let out a perverted giggle, breaking Hiruzen's train of thought. Ah, hello Jiraiya-kun. Hiruzen said as he placed the book away and leaned forward to talk to his old student. Jiraiya was a tall man with waist-length spiky white hair usually tied back into a ponytail, with 2 shoulder-length bangs that framed both sides of his face. He also had red lines that ran down from his eyes and wore a horned forehead protector with the kanji for oil superscript Wanabura, which denotes his affiliation with Mount Mamboku. He also had a noticeable wart on the left side of his nose. Jiraiya wore a green short shirt kimono and matching pants, under which he wore mesh armor that showed out of the sleeves and legs of his outfit. His outfit was completed with hand guards, a simple black belt, traditional Japanese jeta, wooden sandals, a red haori with 2 simple yellow circles on each side, and a scroll on his back. He also had a tattoo in his left palm which resembles one that Gamma has in his as well. Beside he slipped a paper to Hiruzen. Hiruzen read over its contents and let out a low growl. It seemed his evil student had been continuing his experiments even after fleeing Konoha. Anything new you want to fill me in on? Jiraiya asked. He did this every time he came. He would report to Hiruzen, ask about Naruto and then leave for another 3 years. Well. Hiruzen stated with a sigh. He knows about Kushina, his senju lineage, and is currently trying to guess who his father is because I refuse to tell him. Hiruzen chuckled at the last part. He then noticed a distant look on Jiraiya's face. Hiruzen let a small smile grace his lips as he knew what Jiraiya was thinking. I know what you're thinking. He said and Jiraiya turned to him with a humph. You never cease to amaze me do you sensei? Jiraiya asked and Hiruzen could only shrug. You can do it if you want, however Hiruzen stated with Jiraiya's eyes on him. You have to keep running the spy network. Jiraiya took the thought into his mind. Could he do both? Very well sensei, I will be leaving for the next 2 weeks, then I will return and take up the brat as my apprentice. Jiraiya said as he walked over to the windowsill. Hiruzen nodded and Jiraiya was gone into the night. Hiruzen let out a harsh breath. The civilian council was going to have a cow. 8 hours later. Yamanaka residence, Konohagakure. Naruto smiled as he rang the doorbell for the Yamanaka residence. The house wasn't too big nor too small. It was just enough for a shinobi clan with their numbers. Naruto was dressed casually in a black muscle t-shirt and black jeans with his forehead protector around his arm. It wasn't a necessity, but he felt naked without it. He had received a message from a Yamanaka stating that Inoichi, the clan head, requested his presence. As the door opened, Naruto came face to face with a familiar female. She had her platinum blonde hair and a high ponytail with bangs covering the right side of her face. She wore a purple t-shirt that went midriff and purple jeans, which Naruto found rather amusing. "Naruto?" she asked with a raised eyebrow, then noticed that on his arm was the Senju clan insignia, making her jaw drop to the ground, then come back up. "Hi Ino," he said casually with his eyes on her. She was taller than him by about an inch or two, but her frame was rather petite, except for her assets of course that printed it in the shirt she wore. He blushed as he observed her, but luckily for him she didn't notice. "You're the Senju clan heir?" she asked, and Naruto only nodded his head. He was about to speak, but she stopped him. "Does that mean you are noble and have a lot of money?" she asked, squealing slightly. "Yes," he admitted, and she turned and gestured for him to walk in. "Please don't make a big deal out of it," he pleaded, and she only nodded and told her to follow. "You know why you are here?" she asked, and Naruto shook his head negatively. "My dad invited Shikamaru and Choji along with their parents. My dad said something about discussing politics over dinner," she explained, and he nodded silently. He had known something like this would happen sooner or later. He had forced the clones to drill everything into his head. It worked. He knew what to talk about. Politics were strictly politics. As Ino led him into the dining room, he saw that everyone was already waiting for him. So he sat in the chair Ino gestured for him, and she sat next to him. "Naruto?" both Shikamaru and Choji asked, completely shocked. "Hey guys," he replied, and they both kept staring at him. "Before you ask, I am the Senju clan heir and the Uzumaki clan heir, don't make a big deal out of it," he said, and they only stared some more. "So you're pretty much like Sasuke?" Choji asked, making Naruto's happy face turn into a scowl. "I may have some nobility, but I'm not pompous and bossy like that arrogant idiot," Naruto said, and was surprised when Ino didn't hit him upside the head for disrespecting her Sasuke-kun. "Anyway," Inoichi said, and the heads turned to him. "Naruto Dono, we requested you presence for two reasons. One, to form an alliance ship for our clans, and to tell you everything we know about Kushina," he said, perking Naruto's interest. The other genin were confused with the last part but kept quiet. "Don't I have to be a clan head to form alliance ship?" he asked, and all clan heads shook their heads no. "Once you are the last person in the village from that clan we can discuss these things with you. We even tried Sasuke, but the brat said, and I quote, 'My clan is the best and doesn't need any help,' Choza said," and Naruto chuckled. "That pretty much sound like him," he said just as Ino's mother brought the dinner. Naruto looked around and saw that the time was 6, meaning he still had time before the Anbu was to meet him. The meal consisted of rice, chicken, pork, salads, and you'll never believe it, ramen. All the people were shocked when Naruto ate 16 bowls of ramen. After the dinner, Naruto sat in Inoichi's den with Shikaku and Choza and their spouses. The other were outside either cleaning up and or watching clouds. A silencing jutsu was placed, and they talked about endless politics, and it even went as far as suggesting a marriage contract between Naruto and Ino, which the boy blushed in embarrassment, then Inoichi said it was a joke. So now we find Naruto walking down the road with the Ino Shikacho formation. All was quiet except for the munches of Choji and his chips. "Hey Ino," Naruto called, and his fellow blonde looked at him. "Do you train regularly?" he asked, and she looked down. "I can't train so much, I will get bulky and Sasuke-kun will go after forehead," she said, and he sighed with a shake of his head. "That's not really important, being a fangirl is not a good hobby, it could get you killed, you also need to eat regularly. When you answered the door for me, your body looked a little petite for a kunoichi," he explained. "So Naruto, you were checking out my body?" she asked with a blush, and he question made him blush as well. "How about I give you some tips and whatnot, I can even help you train," he suggested, and she began to think it over. She looked hesitant but shrugged. If it could help her get Sasuke-kun and be a strong kunoichi, she was taking the offer. She nodded to him. By this time they had reached his apartment and he walked up the steps, then yelled back at her. "Meet me at training ground 2 in a week." She nodded and walked off with Shika and Choji, who had been watching the altercation in slight amusement. The next month was going to be one hell of a shit. Chapter 003, Sanin as a sensei. 1 week later we find Naruto in training ground 2. He leaned up against the stump in the middle of the grounds while his clones were working their assess off. They had completed the books and he stored them in his house. Right now the clones were practicing the following: tree walking and throwing weapons. It was all he had been doing for the past week. He had almost gotten the hang of tree walking, and the weapons throwing was proving to be a little difficult as he had no proper training in it in the past. By now the word of Naruto being the Senju clan heir had reached the ears of the now outraged civilians who, after calming down about being kept in the dark, apologized profusely to Naruto, who waved it off as nothing. This shocked the villagers and shinobis alike to great proportion. Naruto had been beaten, assaulted and all other forms of abuse by the village, and he simply told them it was okay. This convinced most villagers he was definitely not the nine-tailed fox. Others, however, were simply raging about he was the Nine Tails, trying to throw the village off of its scent. They raged internally, of course. As the sun beamed down in his closed eyelids, he let out a long sigh. Then suddenly the sun was blocked out by a shadowy figure, and before they could talk, "Hello, Ino," he said, making her jump back and make a sound that was close to each. She then glared at her fellow blonde. Naruto opened his eyes lazily and sat up. "How did you know it was me?" she asked. Naruto simply stood and stretched as he worked out some kinks in his neck and back. He turned back to Ino. "I originally come from two clans, each of which has a special ability. Senju clan has the wood release, and the Uzumaki clan has extreme sensory abilities," he explained, and she only nodded. "Before we start, I want to ask you some questions." She nodded. He called over a shadow clone and whispered to it and then turned around and beckoned for Ino to follow. She looked at his retreating figure and shrugged as she ran to catch up to him. As she reached his side, she noticed a distant look on his face. She was about to ask what happened to him when he turned to face him. "Is there something wrong with me? Physically, I mean?" he asked, explained with his azure eyes drilling into her. "I don't understand," she said, and Naruto ran a hand through his hair with a sigh. "Why doesn't Sakura like me? I was her friend when no one else wanted to be because of her forehead after you, of course," he said, and then continued walking. Ino was looking at him as he walked and she shook her head. She walked back up next to him and grabbed his forearm. He stopped and turned to her. His deep azure blue eyes peering into her pale blue ones. "I'm sure forehead will come around after I win over Sasuke-kun," she said, making Naruto snort. She glared at him as she took it as an insult, but Naruto only smirked. "What do you really see in Sasuke team?" Naruto asked, and Ino placed a hand on her chin and began to think. "Nah, just kidding," she was in mock shock. "He's mysterious, sexy, smart and a strong shinobi, and also comes from a prestigious clan," she said, and Naruto only chuckled a dark chuckle at her response. "What's so funny?" Naruto didn't respond. He simply turned to the clones that were still working and told them to dispel. When they did, the entire air was coarse in smoke, and Naruto was standing there only overwhelmed by the knowledge a little. Those meditation exercises worked. "As to answer your question as to why I laughed," Naruto said, and Ino turned to him. "I am all of those things too. You don't see girls raw in over me," he said, and Ino burst into laughter. "Really, you of all people are those things?" she asked, and Naruto's smirk yes wider. "Let's compare then," he suggested, and she nodded her head almost instantly. "Sasuke is mysterious, we don't know why he's always so greedy, and it's kind of cool," she said. "There are endless secrets you don't know about me, and as for why he's greedy, it's because he wants to kill his older brother, Itachi," Naruto explained, and Ino's eyes were wide. "That's why he never says anything at all," she yelled. Then Naruto placed a finger in the air. "One for me," he said. "Alright, he's sexy, his body is perfect," Ino said with a smirk of satisfaction. Naruto took her hand and used one of her fingers to trace his whisker marks, making her blush. "Cute and sexy, right?" he asked, and she only nodded solemnly. "He's a good shinobi, he knows a fire release technique, has the Sharingan and can make a clone," she said, smirking. "I may not know any ninjutsu, but I know I have at least water release and earth release, I have the wood release, and I can do a clone jutsu 10 times better than the normal clone. Shadow clones are physical clones that can do anything I ask of them. Their knowledge is also transported to me when they dispel," he explained, and her jaw dropped. "Last one then, he come from a prestigious clan," she said, and knew that it made no sense from the moment it left her lips. "Don't answer," she said when he opened his mouth. He shrugged as they reached the lake where the waterfall's water fell into. Ino immediately saw flowers and squealed as she ran over to them. Naruto chuckled at her love for flowers. He followed her and watched as she plucked a flower. "Akabara," he said, and she spun round with a shocked expression on her face. Naruto only smirked and sat next to her, looking straight into her eyes. "Red rose, it means romance." "How did you know?" she asked, and Naruto smirked and took the rose from her. "I have a small garden home," he explained, and she immediately jumped on him, pinning him to the ground. "You have to show me," she squealed, and Naruto shrugged. "I don't see why not. How about after training?" he asked, and she nodded her head vigorously. "Let's start training now," she urged, and got up only for Naruto to pull her back down. "Why do you want to become a shinobi?" "I want to be the clan head of the Yamanaka clan and show Sasuke-kun I'm a great kunoichi, so he'll go on a date with me," she exclaimed, and Naruto got up and walked away. "Hey. Where are you going?" "Home, I can't take fangirls, you want to train with me, get rid of the fangirlism," he said, and was gone. Ino watched shock as he left. Was she a fangirl? Maybe. Fine, if Naruto didn't want to train her, so be it. She got up and left in the opposite direction of Naruto. Later. Yamanaka residence, Kanahagakure. Ino walked into the family dinner room with a distant look on her face, which her parents immediately saw and glanced at each other. They watched as Ino sat and placed her elbows on the table. Elbows? Her mother warned and she quickly removed them. She then turned to her parents and gave them a weak smile. They noticed this as well and, "What's wrong, Haim?" Inoichi asked his daughter and she removed a strand of hair out of her face. "Dad?" she asked. "Am I a fangirl?" she asked and Inoichi stiffened. "I'm not going to lie, yes." Inada said bluntly, making both Ino and Inoichi drop their jaws. "You study too much about that brat of an Uchiha, we don't even approve of him, but let you be to make you happy, but since you brought it up, yes, you a fangirl, you only know once clan jutsu, you don't train and practically starve yourself." Ino looked down and sighed. Maybe Naruto and her mother was right. Maybe she was a fangirl. "What do you think, Dad?" he asked and received a nervous chuckle from him. "I have to agree with your mom," he said nervously and Ino let a small smile grace her face. Her parents may have been blunt about it, but they were right. Fangirls were simply people with wasted talent. She got up from her seat. "Mom, Dad, I'm going to go train, if you need me I'll be at the Senju compound, Naruto offered to train me earlier, and I'm accepting," she said and darted up the stairs to get ready. "If that boy only touches Ino inappropriately I'll castrate him with a senbon needle." Inoichi growled, making Inada chuckle at her husband's protectiveness. "Naruto doesn't seem like that kind of child," she said and he huffed and went back to eating. Ino came back downstairs with her ninja equipment and her hit I-8 strapped around her waist. "Later guys," she yelled only to be stopped by, "Wait." Inoichi yelled and she spun around to face her parents who were pointing at her dinner. "I'll eat at Naruto's," she said running out, making Inoichi groan and stand up yelling. "What exactly is she going to eat?" he yelled, obviously thinking something inappropriate for children their age, only to get a smack by his wife who glared at him, making him cower like a dog with its tail between its legs. "Men. Later." Senju compound, Kanahagakure. The Senju compound was a spacious place. It had the main building in the center of smaller ones forming a protective barrier or circle around the main complex. Ino stopped at the gates to see two guards. They looked at her then at each other. "Naruto-sama said you'd be coming." A guard yelled and opened the gate for Ino, who walked in wearily. She saw many people going about their business, so she shrugged and walked straight to the main complex. "What did he mean Naruto said I would be coming?" she asked, stopping in front of obviously the main building. It was 3 stories tall and way too big for one person. She knocked on the door twice and a man opened the door. He was a butler's suit and had gray hair. "Hello, I am Hisuna, how may I help you?" he asked, making Ino shiver from the depth of his voice. "I came to see Naruto," she said and the man nodded and told her to follow him. She grew a tick mark as a lot of men have been telling her to follow them lately. "Well, just Naruto and Hisuna, but you get the point." They walked through the house and came face to face with a door. On the door marked the kanji for den and he didn't knock. He simply opened it and gestured for her to go in and left. She shrugged and went in. Naruto was in the center of the room wearing casual clothing as he worked. He was facing the other way. The desk he was at was a complete circle with him in the middle and a space for him to enter and exit. It had endless books on top of books on the shelves. She wondered what Naruto was doing and looked closer. She saw over his shoulder that he was reading about some named Mito Uzumaki. "Hey Ino," he said, making her jump again. She glared at him for this and he turned around to meet her eyes. He noticed the ninja equipment and leaned back. "So I'm guessing you forgot about Sasuke team?" "Kind of," she admitted. "My parents told me that they didn't really approve of him and just wanted me to be happy, so I'm going to return the favor and make them proud of me," she said and Naruto smiled. "That's what it means to be a shinobi or kunoichi, to put others before you, so, if we're going to start now tell me about yourself and your skills," he said and she sat down on the couch a roll from him. "I want name, likes, dislikes, hobbies and dream." "Okay, I'm Ino Yamanaka, I like flowers, shopping, cherry tomatoes and pudding, I hate sashimi and people who think I'm ugly, my hobbies are shopping and now training, and my dream is to be a good clan head in the future and marry a man who loves me for me." She said, and Naruto smirked. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Senju, I like gardening, ramen, especially at Ichiraku's, I hate how old man Sandane makes me guess who my father is, I hate Sasuke team and people who judge others, my hobbies are training, finding out hints about my mother, and my dream is to become Hokage," he said with a slight smirk. "How did you know to ask these things?" Ino asked and Naruto shrugged. "I read in a book that that's what Jonin senseis do when they now meet their team," he said casually and she nodded. "As for my skills, I know the clone, transformation, substitution and my clan's most basic attack, the mind-body transfer," she said and Naruto nodded. "My skills are not much, I know the shadow clone, transformation, substitution, sexy jutsu, and I know how to use my clan sensory abilities," he said. "What now?" she asked. Naruto smirked. This was going to be fun. 1 week later. Training Ground 2, Konohagakure. Naruto swung his fist and Ino ducked under the punch. She sent a right leg sweep to his legs, he jumped over and back flipped away. He smirked when he saw Ino panting. He was panting as well, but not as much as Ino. She took in a deep breath and charged at Naruto. Naruto smirked when Ino reached in front of him and sent a kick for her side. She smirked as she flipped and jumped over him and swung an axe kick. Naruto brought his 2 hands up in an X and parried the hit. She groaned and jumped away. Naruto took out 2 of his special kunai and twirled them on the hook. Ino's eyes grew considerably at the kunai. She had been hit with of those before and it had stung. She didn't know why but it did. She glared as he twirled the kunai on his index finger. She took out her kunai which was the standard ones and threw them at him. He smirked as he caught the kunai between the holes with the blades of his. Her jaw dropped when she saw his skills with the kunai. She grounded her teeth. She took out 2 more kunai and sent 2, the other 2 she held in a reverse vice grip. She ran towards him at great speed. She kicked his feet from under him sending him down on his rear. She took a kunai and pressed it against his neck. She smirked only to feel the sharpness of another kunai on her neck. Yield. He ordered and she dropped the kunai. The Naruto on the ground burst into smoke and was gone. Naruto held out his hand and helped her up. How did I do? She asked and Naruto smirked and held out a card for her. She watched it in curiosity. This is an affinity card that tests the type of chakra you have out of the 5 elements. Test it and meet me back in a week for me to show you the steps. He said. She nodded and gave him a quick hug and was about to leave when, "Hey Ino?" Naruto asked softly and she turned to meet his eyes. They just stared at each other until Naruto let out a sigh. "I was wondering if you'd like to hang out with me sometime." He blushed. She blushed hard and cleared her throat. "I'd like that," she said. "Pick me up Friday night." He nodded his head and she left. He sighed and sat in the clearing. He finally managed to ask her out. He had had internal battles with himself about asking her out. Over the week they had really gotten to know each other and found out that they had a lot in common. Yes, the pairing is starting early in the story, but I need it for the plot, please understand. He was cut off from his thoughts when he heard a rustle in the lush green forests. He whipped out 2 kunai and slipped into a defensive stance. He heard the rustles again and sent the 2 kunais into the forest. He heard nothing. As he was the Jinchuriki of the 9 tails he had excellent sight in the dark from the fox he held as a prisoner. He let out a sigh and sent 2 more kunai only to hear the same thing, nothing. He then mentally face-palmed. He was an idiot. He closed his eyes and channeled his chakra to his ears and nose. He sensed the presence of someone and sent a hail of kunai at them. He was met by silence once again, then a lone figure stepped out. He didn't recognize the man and stepped back. The man walked closer to him as Naruto walked further back. "Who are you?" "I am Jiraiya no Sannin, the gallant and Gama Sennin, and I'm your sensei." Chapter 004, Life as Expected. "My sensei?" "Yes, I am taking you on as my apprentice," Jiraiya said triumphantly. "Don't you need my consent before you say those kind of things?" Naruto asked with a sweat drop. "Don't you want to be the apprentice of the Sannin?" Jiraiya asked with a raised eyebrow. "Yes, it's an awesome opportunity, but your enthusiasm is suspicious. Why do you want to take me as an apprentice? Wouldn't Sasuke team be a better choice as he's the rookie of the year?" Naruto asked and Jiraiya let out a chuckle. "Would you believe me if I told you that I was the dead last 2? He asked and Naruto's jaw dropped. "Seriously?" he asked and Jiraiya nodded and took a seat on the lush green grass of the clearing. "Truth be told, I am only training you because I owe your parents," he said and Naruto turned to him slowly and groaned. "You're not going to tell me either, are you?" "Nope. Fine, I accept," he said plainly and Jiraiya smirked. "What have you been doing so far?" "For the past 2 weeks I improved my mental knowledge. I mastered tree walking and throwing weapons. Taijutsu and elemental manipulation was this week, and then the last week was to try and see if I could learn at least 2 ninjutsu," Naruto explained. "What about physically?" "I run 50 laps a day while my clones train. After the laps I do 300 push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups and jumping jacks," he said. Jiraiya had to admit he was impressed. "Test your affinity now," Jiraiya commanded. Naruto shrugged and held up the paper. Using his good chakra control, he channeled some chakra into the paper and it split into 4 pieces of paper, 1 burst into flames, 1 crumpled, 1 crumbled, and the last got damp. The water from the last touched the crumbs of earth, then a plant sprouted. A shock wave was then sent throughout the training ground, knocking both Shinobis unconscious. "Mindscape, Naruto." Both Naruto and Jiraiya opened their eyes to see themselves in a hallway. The ground was covered in ankle-length water, dim yellow lamps were on the walls with a bunch of pipes running along the walls and the roof. They looked at each other and then back down the dark hallway. "Where are we, sensei?" "No idea," Jiraiya said. "Hum to me, mortals." A deep voice echoed throughout the halls. Both men froze and looked at each other again. Naruto let out a sigh and began to walk in the direction of the voice. "Wait. Where are you going, Gaki?" Jiraiya asked running up to meet him. Naruto turned to face his sensei and ran a hand through his hair sheepishly. He sighed. I feel like I know this place like the back of mine. He said and turned back around. Come on Jiraiya-sensei, I can sense demonic chakra, this must be the residence of my tenant. Naruto said and nodded for Jiraiya to follow. Jiraiya looked quizzical and followed Naruto. How can you sense chakra in here? He asked. Uzumaki. He stated simply and Jiraiya nodded. Kushina had that same ability, but Jiraiya always thought it was a special ability only she could do. He shrugged and followed Naruto. 5 minutes later they came face to face with a giant door. On the door was the kanji for Kaiu. Naruto opened the door and walked in with Jiraiya behind him. Once the door closed behind him with a loud clank and the lock went back into place, black slitted red eyes opened and peered down on the two Konoha shinobi. What kind of cruel joke is Kami playing on me? The Kyuubi's voice bellowed making the humans raise an eyebrow. My host is nothing but a blonde baka. It said making Naruto glare. Yep. Naruto said making the other beings in the room watch him strangely. You, the great Kyuubi is sealed within a 12-year-old genin. Naruto said. Why am I even here? I don't want a weak host, so I was going to tell you about the Uzumaki clan Kekkei Janaki. He said making both spike-haired shinobi to go bug-eyed. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but Kyuubi cut him off. Gyozo no Ringu. Kyuubi spoke. Elements of the ring. Naruto wondered out loud. Yes, it allows the user to have great control over all of the 5 elements, but also add 2 elements to come up with 1, and add 3 to come up with 1, however, it is quite taxing on the body, you can make 4 sub-elements, and 1 super sub-elements. It explained and Naruto glanced at Jiraiya who was eyeing the fox suspiciously. What's wrong sensei? Naruto asked and Jiraiya turned to him. Kushina never had that ability or any other Uzumaki I know of. Jiraiya said suspiciously making the great fox snort in amusement. And how many Uzumakis did you know? Kyuubi asked with slight annoyance in his deep demonic voice. Jiraiya's serious expression turned sheepish. About 3. He said and Naruto sweat dropped while Kyuubi snickered. And they were? Kushina Uzumaki, Mito Uzumaki and Sasashi Uzumaki. He replied with a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Mito was my first Jinchuriki, Kushina was my second, and Sasashi was Kushina's father. You know some quite powerful and well-known Uzumakas, Mito and Kushina, didn't have it because I never allowed them to, I control whether they get it or not, Mito and Kushina were already strong, so I left them be. The kid needs it and Sasashi had it, but never told anyone fearing people would use his family to get to him. Kyuubi said with a smirk. Back to business. Naruto said slightly irritated that he was being ignored by both the Kyuubi and his newly appointed sensei. About the Kekkei Janaki, explained it some more, I'm confused. He said sheepishly. Kyuubi groaned. Gyozo no Ringu, sub-elements, or Kekkei Genkai are elements where you combine 2 of the normal elements to come out with 1, pick 2 and I will explain. Wind and lightning. Water and lightning will make Cranton. Storm release. Yes. It answered simply then explained some more. A super sub-elements is when 3 elements are combines, they are also called Kekkei Tenta. Naruto nodded his head then turned back to Jiraiya. What do you think sensei? It's a good opportunity to learn some new things, but how can we trust it? Can we trust you? Naruto asked looking at the fox. Kyuubi only shook his head negatively. It won't be easy for me to gain your trust, but I can tell you that even as demons Biju will live up to their word. Kyuubi explained. Fine by me, I think the fact that he didn't lie is a sign we can trust him. Naruto said and Jiraiya nodded slightly. How do we do this? Jiraiya asked. When you go back to the real world just say Yozo no Ringu activate and you will know what to do. Kyuubi explained began to kick them out of his humble abode. Don't be a weak Jinchuriki, by the way, you'll have to figure out how to use the Kekkei Genkais and Kekkei Toda on your own. Naruto groaned at the last part and faded from view. Meanwhile, Yamanaka residence, Konohagakure, Inoichi and Inada sat quietly enjoying their afternoon snack. They were eating rice and meats. They would normally have light conversation, but they were waiting on Ino. Then suddenly, a purple blue burst through the door. He asked me out. Inada smiled and Inoichi eyed his daughter. Inada knew who it was while Inoichi thought it was. You are not going out with that brat. He said sternly making both females turn to him. What? Why? Ino yelled. Inoichi simply reclined in his chair and crossed his arms. I don't want you near that brat. He said and Ino let out a sigh and put on the most fearsome jutsu in the elemental nations. Puppy eye jutsu. But Naruto-kun has been training me for the past week. She pleaded and Inoichi's mouth opened. You're talking about Naruto? Yes, who did you think I was talking about? Sasuke. Yes. He mumbled under his breath. Well, it was Naruto who asked me out and I'm going shopping to buy a dress. She said and walked upstairs. Well wasn't that a little awkward? Inada said with a chuckle. A little. Meanwhile. TG2, Konohagakure. Yozo no Ringu activate. The white ceiling circle began to glow on the ground around Naruto who was standing. Jiraiya was facing him and looking on in great interest. The ceiling array began to spin. 2 minutes later it was moving at least at the speed of sound. It then stopped and changed to a deep red color, then a ghost-like image appeared between the sensei and student duo. "Who are you?" The voice of a woman came. It was firm and stern. It was a voice that had two meaning. The first was what the woman said. And the second was answer or you die. Naruto observed the figure that had appeared. It was a woman he figured out by the voice, the figure and the long flowing hair. Her hair was a deep red, her eyes were midnight blue, and her face was round. She wore a full body mesh suit, a red mini-skirt over it, as a shirt she wore a dark purple jacket that was long-sleeved. In her feet were shinobi sandals with heels and it went up to her knees. "And Naruto Uzumaki senju?" Naruto answered. The woman raised an eyebrow though it could have barely be seen as she was still in a ghost-like form. Also, by this time Jiraiya was standing next to Naruto. "You're a senju?" A nod. "How?" Naruto paled as he didn't know how, he was just told that he was and had forgotten to ask the question, but was shocked when Jiraiya went and whispered in her ears. Her eyes opened wide and slightly, and she whispered something back to Jiraiya who nodded his head positively. Jiraiya went back and stood beside Naruto. "Choose your Kekkei Genkai and your Kekkei Tenta," she stated and Naruto shook his head negatively. "Before that I want to know two things," he said and she grew a tick mark. "Who are you and what elements make what?" "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, co-founder of the Uzumaki clan, and if what that white-haired man says is true about Kushina-chan being your mother, I am also your great-grandaunt." Naruto nodded and gestured for her to continue. "You can combine any element with any elements, that is all I can tell you." "Okay, so the Kyuubi said I can choose 4 Kekkei Genkai and 1 Kekkei Tenta, that true?" "Kyuubi? Interesting." She thought and gave him a curt bid to which he nodded back. "I already have Mokuton, so how about fire and earth, water and wind and fire, and the last one for Kekkei Genkai will be lightning and water, what would that make?" he said asked. "The first you called was Imton, then Heimton, the third was Shakuton, and the last was Ranton, are these your final choices?" Naila asked and Naruto turned to Jiraiya who shrugged. "Lava, ice, scorch and storm sounds about right." Naruto mused. Naila nodded and ran through 5 unfamiliar hand seals. Naruto's eyes began to glow and then turned the midnight blue like all Uzumaki's. His hair immediately grew until he had 2 red bangs framing his face and the base of his hair remained yellow as the tips of all the spikes turned black. Jiraiya's eyes grew wide as he looked like a mixed hair-colored yandere which was bad. The other villages couldn't know who he was, but then that thought was immediately trumped when his whisker marks faded. "You may want to look in a mirror after you pick the Kekkei Tenta," she warned and Naruto rose an eyebrow and shrugged it off as nothing and then placed his hand on his chin. "I can mix any 3 elements for the Kekkei Tenta, right?" A nod. "Then I choose wind, water and fire." Naila placed a hand on her chin. "That isn't one, but I can make it for you, since water and wind makes ice, with the added effect of fire the ice will become dry, so it shall be called Doreisutin or dry ice release, I shall take my leave." As she said that a stomach-griping pain shot throughout Naruto's body. Jiraiya was by his side immediately. Naruto was screaming in unconsciousness. He immediately placed a private seal around the clearing and waited a minute until Naruto stopped screaming but remained in a comatose. Unconscious as a dead man. Jiraiya sighed and threw him over his shoulder and began walking towards the Hokage tower. He would have rather used the Shunshin no Jutsu, but he didn't know what his chakra would do to Naruto's unconscious life force. So he did the natural thing. It may have been natural, but not for shinobi. He walked. Later. Store, Konohagakure. Ino walked out of Konoha's most expensive store with 4 bags being juggled in her arms. She had spent 2 hours shopping and had finally found the right dress. Shopping aside, she had been thinking about the past week and why she fell for Naruto. She had fallen for him on their 3rd day of training. She smiled at the memory. Flashback. 4 days ago, Konohagakure. Naruto sat atop the waterfall that was over training ground 2. It was about 15 feet high and had beautiful crystal clear waters. On top of the waterfall was a giant tree to which he rested in. The lush green grass and trees of the hidden leaf slept on the ground below. He was currently waiting for Ino. Since Ino came from a ninja clan and had her parents to help her train, Ino already knew and mastered the tree walking exercise. Ino had given him some pointers and he had also completed it. Now he was waiting for her to arrive so they could start the water walking exercise. On Naruto's lap was a pair of swim trunks. He had also recommended Ino come prepared to get wet. She had told him she would do what was necessary and here he was waiting for her. She was late. This was also a first for Ino. Even though they had only really gotten to know each other in the past 2 days, he had figured out she liked punctuality and had even come late for spite. It was funny to watch her rant on and on about being late, but this time she was the one who was late. He let out a frustrated sigh and jumped down onto the ground. He quickly stripped of his black harness and quickly glanced around. Seeing no one, he took off his boxers and slipped on his swim trunks. He stretched and walked closer to the river. The water wasn't shallow, so standing in it was an easy task. And applying chakra to his feet to stick to the surface underneath the water. The current wasn't rough, so he knew he would fall to his death off the cliff for 2 reasons. 1. The chakra on his feet would keep him steady and sturdy, and 2. The waters at the bottom was not clear as the top, and the lake was just like the river at the top. Shallow. As he eased himself down in clear waters, a shadow immediately blocked out the sun's powerful UV rays. He opened an eye to see Ino and his mouth dropped. She was a 2-piece bikini. It was purple with a yellow floral design on it. It also showed a decent amount of cleavage for a young woman of 14 years. Yes, there are 14, start academy at age and go for 6 years. A small trickle of blood came out of Naruto's nose as he watched Ino tower over his sitting position. Unfortunately for him, she saw the blood and cocked back her fist. Pervert. He saw Scent careening over the edge of the cliff and smashed into the green grass of the clearing underneath. 5 minutes later, he came back up with a black eye and a bruised lip. Damn. Women could be really strong when they are angry. He saw Ino in the water sitting, just like he had been doing, and went next to her. Sorry, everyone has a perverted side and I couldn't control it. He apologized profusely and she only got a tick mark and then smirked mischievously. So, you think I'm beautiful? She asked and Naruto froze. There were 2 possible outcomes to this situation and he didn't like either of them as they were a hazard to his health. 1. Say yes and get beaten for apparently staring at her, and 2. Say no and get beaten for thinking she was ugly. So he came up with an alternative. He smirked. Yes and no. Ino was confused. Though she never would admit any of these things, but she was both flattered and disappointed. He said yes, she looked good, and no, as in she looked bad, right? What does that mean? Yes, as in you are a beautiful young woman, and no, as in you can be a man's worst enemy when angry. He said. Ino chuckled lightly and shrugged. Thank you. For what? He asked and she turned to him. You're the first person before my dad and mom to tell me I'm beautiful, thank you. She said with a slight tint of pink on her cheeks. You're welcome, you deserve it, now let's get to training. Then flashback, Konohagakure. That was the day. After those exact words left his mouth, she fell in love with him. Now she was excited for her date with him the day after next. She looked up in the sky and grinned. She was finally going out with the boy of her dreams. Chapter 005, Love Blinds All Eyes. Hiruzen groaned as he filled out some more paperwork. It was early evening and he was still here battling his mortal enemy. Paperwork. It was so bad sometimes he thought he even hears the paperwork mocking him. As he was continuously signing paperwork, his eyes stumbled on something he found rather interesting. As he read it, he sighed and placed it to the side. Naruto was going to have a horse. Speaking of Naruto, just as he signed the next paper, he sensed someone on his windowsill. He knew who it was already. It was 2 people. One was unconscious and the other had a habit of entering through the window. Hello Jiraiya-kun, what's wrong with Naruto? Jiraiya let out a sigh as he placed Naruto to lay on the couch. He went and stood right in front of Hiruzen and began. He filled him in on everything from meeting the 9 tails to meeting Naila, then unconscious on Naruto's part. Did you know there was such a thing? Jiraiya asked with a scratch of his mane-like hair. Yes, this Naila person you speak of was Mito-sama's older sister. They founded the Uzumaki clan together, then Mito married Hashirama-sensei, and had a son who then married and had Tsunade-chan, who then had Minato with you, and Minato had Naruto with Kushina. Hiruzen explained, and Jiraiya took it all in bit by bit. Who knows about Yozo no Ringu? Now it's you, Itachi and myself. Hiruzen said and Jiraiya nodded, then his face turned grim. Speaking of Itachi, I found out some information from him. He joined a group known as Akatsuki. Jiraiya said. Not much is known to him as he has only been a member for a year. He explained, taking a seat on the windowsill. He only knows their purpose, which is to capture the Jinchurikis and take their Bijuu. He is currently trying to uncover more information, and there are only 2 things driving him onward despite his illness. Being. The first is that he wants to protect his younger brother Sasuke and to protect Naruto as he owes it to Kushina. Jiraiya said, a small smile gracing his lips. Then you blame him? Hiruzen said, a smile also on his lips. He loves Sasuke as much as to purpose leave him alive during the massacre, and Kushina tad him in his days as a genin and chiknin. He said. Yes, but that illness is nothing to play with, he only has about 5 to 6 more years. Jiraiya said. We can't carry him to Tsunade because Dansum has spies watching her every movement to see if she betrays Konoha. Hiruzen said bitterly, then smirked. Even the great Dansum loses sight of his targets. He chuckled. Jiraiya smiled, then looked back over at Naruto, who was sleeping like a baby. Has the council tried anything? Jiraiya asked grimly as he turned towards Hiruzen. Well, Yamanaka, Akamichi and Nara invited him over for lunch to discuss an alliance between the clans. It wasn't anything big, but he has however started to train with Inoichi's daughter. That ain't the half of it, before I met Naruto I was in the shadows watching him spar with the Yamanaka heiress. He asked her out on a date. He said with a lecherous grin. I have some good news and bad news. Hiruzen said ignoring Jiraiya's grin. Yeah? Good news is he's kind of a pervert. Jiraiya began to cry in tears and Hiruzen silenced him with a clear of his throat. And the bad? Jiraiya asked slowly. Hiruzen simply took up the paper from before and handed it to Jiraiya. Jiraiya read. Okage-sama, I request a meeting with Naruto Uzumaki Senju and yourself. It is to discuss a marriage contract between my eldest daughter, Hinata Hyuga and Naruto Uzumaki Senju. Sincerely, Hiashi Hyuga. Hyuga clan head. Jiraiya let out a harsh breath. He gave Hiruzen back the paper and sighed. This is bad, I think the Gaki's in love with the Yamanaka and Hyuga oddly always get what they want. Jiraiya said and Hiruzen took a puff of his pipe. He turned to Jiraiya and chuckled. That's not true. Jiraiya looked at him oddly. How's that? He never got to marry Kushina. Jiraiya snickered then burst out laughing. I still can't believe that he wanted to marry Kushina despite being 5 years older than her. Jiraiya said. He didn't care, he would just say, age is just a number Hiruzen said, and Jiraiya nodded. You know he only wants to gain some access to the power the Senju clan holds, right? Hiruzen nodded. Yes, but he'll never get it. If Naruto really likes Inoichi's daughter he will stick by her side despite Hinata's status as a princess in Konoha. And Naruto's a prince along with Sasuke. Jiraiya let out a deep sigh as he said that. Then it hit Hiruzen like a ton of bricks. I am going to schedule the meeting after Naruto's date so he can make his choice. When is it? Friday. Good, carry Naruto home and I'll take care of this and make sure to explain why he was unconscious, but leave out the meeting. Hiruzen told Jiraiya. Jiraiya nodded, placed Naruto back over his shoulder and left via the window, leaving Hiruzen all by himself. Hiruzen smirked. 2 hours later. Senju compound, Konohagakure. Naruto sat up with a groan. He looked around to see himself in a room. His bedroom. He sat up and walked out after throwing on some pants and a shirt. In the living room Jiraiya sat while scribbling on a notepad. Naruto eyes it suspiciously and went to sit across from Jiraiya who didn't notice him. Naruto scowled at being ignored. Jiraiya-sensei. Jiraiya stopped scribbling and looked up at Naruto. Yeah? What are you writing? Well, you were unconscious I went to hot springs and did some research for my next Icha book. Jiraiya admitted with a shrug. You're the author of those? Yeah. Jiraiya said. You read them? Well I have one, but I haven't started to read it as yet. Naruto admitted sheepishly. Jiraiya immediately told him he had to read it soon and reminded him of what transpired with Naila and the Kyuubi. He then told Naruto to meet him at training ground 2 the following morning and left. Naruto was about to go into the den to continue his research on his mother and find out who his father was when a maid came in. She informed Naruto that he was requested at the ninja store where Tenten worked. Naruto thanked the woman and told her to inform everyone that they had the rest of the day off. She thanked Naruto in return and left to inform everyone of the news. Naruto smiled as the maid walked off. He had hired them after moving into the Senju compound because of his busy training regime. He never forced them to do anything and they were always kind and pleasant. Unlike Sasuke however, he had no servant for one reason, members of the oh-so-great Uchiha clan needed no help no matter what it was. So they never had. Naruto went upstairs and changed into some casual clothes, locked up his den with some seals he had learned, and left to head to the ninja store where he was needed. 2 days later. Yamanaka residence, Konohagakure. Naruto nervously knocked on the door of the Yamanaka residence. Today was the day of his date with Ino, and he was nervous as hell. He was sweating like an angel in the pits of hell. He watched as the door slowly opened. On the other side was Inoichi who was smiling at him innocently. For Naruto however, it was actually too innocent. Good night Inoichi dono. He said. Inoichi simply kept smiling and gestured for him to enter. Naruto walked in and sat on the sofa where Hinata was located, but she was actually smiling normally at him. Hello Naruto-kun, Ino will be down in a couple of minutes. Hinata said to him and then took in his appearance. He wore a rust orange kimono shirt, it was short-sleeved with black flames licking the bottom of the shirt and the ends of the sleeves. His pants consisted of the same color but wasn't the same. It was a slightly kimono pants that also had black flames trimming the ends of the pants sleeve. On his left arm was a sliver plate with the Uzumaki clan insignia etched in and the same thing with the Senju insignia on his right arm. In his hand was a bouquet of flowers. The flowers were an assortment of akabara, red rose, carnation. Red, shirabara, white rose, tsubaki, camellia. Red, susan, daffodil, and pinku no bara, pink rose. All in all they meant romance, love, devotion, excellence, respect and trust respectively. Hinata smiled as she read the real meaning behind the flowers. Naruto sat and waited patiently in awkward silence with Ino's parents. So tell me Naruto. Inoichi began. What do you have planned for the evening? Naruto began to sweat a little as Inoichi's eyes focused on him. We were going to the Silver Swan, then walk around Konoha's Central Park, and then by sunset I was going to take her on top of the Yondame's head for the rest of the evening and enjoy the peace. He explained. Both adults were shocked at the mention of the restaurant but remained neutral. Inoichi and Inada nodded, then Inoichi got up and walked over to Naruto. He was now leaning in close so his mouth was by Naruto's left ear. "Heard my little girl, and I'll castrate you with a senbon needle," he said before walking off, leaving Naruto to wince and shudder at the thought of getting his family jewels removed by a senbon needle. "Don't worry Naruto, I'm going to get Ino, and Inoichi wouldn't do such a thing," Inada said, then left to fetch Ino. Naruto was still clutching his manhood even after both adults left. Soon afterward Ino and her mother came down. Naruto was shocked at what he saw. She wore a purple strapless dress that had a light blue floral pattern. It showed a decent amount of her cleavage from her mid-C cup breast. The dress also hugged her waist, showing off her curves. She wore some strawberry lip gloss on her lips with some mascara and other makeup on her face. The dress stopped at about shin's length where her feet showed that she wore purple 2-inch heels. On her shoulder was a purple purse. Wow, Naruto breathed out. Inada smirked as Ino blushed a dark shade of crimson. Thank you Naruto-kun," she said. "You look good as well." At this point Naruto came out of his trance and Inoichi came out of his den. "These are for you," he said, thrusting the flowers into her face. Her eyes widened as she saw the flowers and immediately looked at the hidden message behind the flowers. "Say Naruto-kun, do you know the real meaning behind the flowers?" "No." He lied. He noticed Ino's face fell slightly and inwardly smirked. "Alright, best you be on your way, Naruto, she is to be home no later than 11. Naruto nodded at Inoichi's words. He offered Ino his hand. She smiled and gave her mother the flowers to put in a vase. As they walked out of the Yamanaka residence to go on their date, they had no idea what troubles the following day would entail. Later. Silver Swan, Konohagakure. Reservations for 2 under Uzumaki Senju. They had arrived at the Silver Swan and was currently at the door where the maître-d'hôtel hotel master carried them to their seats. It was a table practically in the middle of the room with 2 chairs. One on either side. Ino, who was still in shock, only had her mouth agape and was breathing fine. "Read." "Barely, Ino-chan," Naruto said, snapping his fingers in her face. She jumped and came back to the world of the living, then stared at Naruto like it had 2 heads. "No, make that 3. How can you afford a place like this?" she hissed lowly, making Naruto chuckle and her raise a brow. Naruto leaned over the table so he was by her ears. "Anything for you?" he whispered, making her blush a color that would make Hinata look like a dull lamp. He leaned back in his seat and a waitress came up to them. "Good evening, I'm Bara and welcome to Silver Swan," the woman named Bara said. "Would you like to hear our special Senju-sama, Yamanaka-sama, or would you like to order normally?" "No thanks," they said in unison, then chuckled. "I would like some tempura, miso soup and cherry tomatoes," Ino said with a small smile. The woman scribbled it down and turned to Naruto. "I would like your largest bowl with miso ramen, asks red bean soup and vegetables," he said, stating the last word bitterly. The woman nodded dumbly and walked off, saying she would be back to take their drinks request. "So Naruto-kun, since this is a date, why don't we try to get to know each other better?" "Well, we do know each other good, but you know what I mean." "Sure, why not?" he said. Thus began their talk. However, the main topic was Naruto's change in hair and eye color. 2 hours later. Yondaime Hokage head, Konohagakure. Naruto sat on the head of the Yondaime with Ino on his lap leaning back into his chest. Their date had gone exceptionally well if it wasn't for Naruto's overconsumption of ramen. Who knew there was an end to that black hole of a stomach? Naruto let out a contemptuous sigh. He watched as Ino leaned up against his chest from her seat in his lap. He smiled down at her and leaned into her hair and sniffed. "Flowers." He smiled her hair and snaked his hands around her waist and placed his chin on her shoulder. She was beautiful. Her pale blue eyes watched over the city of Konoha. "You're beautiful," he murmured, making her blush darkly. She turned around him and ran a hand through his 3-colored hair. "Red, yellow and black. Your hair is beautiful," she said, making him face fault. She laughed as he paid on his back with her laying next to him with her head in his chest. She smiled. Naruto's face was happy. He was on a date with a beautiful young woman who he had broken out of her fangirl stage and molded her into a good kunoichi. "Hey Ino-chan," he called to her. Since he was looking into the sky he couldn't see her head nod, but he felt it. "Did you test your affinity?" She nodded. "Water," she replied. "What about you?" Naruto let out a deep sigh. "I have all 5 affinities." Her head shot up with wide eyes. "It's an Uzumaki clan trait, it lets Uzumakis have control over all 5 affinities and lets them make elemental Kekkei Genkai," he explained. "Really?" A nod. "That's awesome. However, I have absolutely no idea how to use any of them," Naruto said, then a tear escaped his left eye as the next things he said could well break off his entire relationship with Ino. Naruto relayed the story. From meeting Jiraiya to testing his affinity, then the Kyuubi, the information, Naila and lastly what happened when he woke up. He then remained quiet to hear Ino's response. "You read that perverted book?" she asked, and Naruto jumped up and turned to her with pure disbelief printed on his face. "That's what you got out of everything I just told you?" he asked. Ino nodded and sat up. She turned and glared at Naruto. Naruto gulped nervously as he waited for her to say or do something. The spit, however, was ever present in his throat and wouldn't go down his windpipe. "If you ever do anything perverted to me, I will personally castrate you with old and rusty kunai," she said. Naruto nodded vigorously, then she paid back down with Naruto doing the same. "Did I just get permission to read a perverted book with some ground rules?" he asked and felt her nod into his chest. "And what do you think about the Kyuubi? If you have a humongous fox with 9 tails in your god, then you are considered a hero by me," she said. Tears of joy welled in Naruto's eyes as he hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Ino-chan," he whispered. "I was always hated by the village because of Kyuubi. Mind hearing my life story?" he asked, and she gestured for him to go on. Before he started, Naruto glanced at the clock on the Tower of Heaven, the tallest building in the village. The time? 10 o'clock in the night. He smiled and turned back to her to hear her speak. "It's still early, we still have an hour, so why don't you go ahead?" she suggested. Naruto nodded. "The old man told me that he placed me in an orphanage at 2 weeks old because he couldn't watch over me as he had to go back to being Hokage. I stayed in the orphanage happily for 4 months until the word of the Kyuubi reached the ears of the villagers. At 5 months old was when I started to crawl, and they would let me crawl into dangerous places and only stopped me when Anbu or the old man arrived," he said with a tear in his eyes. "At the age of 4 I was kicked out of the orphanage for reaching back late at night, but it wasn't my fault. I was being chased by a mob of chunin and angry civilians." Tears were now selling in Ino's eyes. "I roamed the streets of Konoha and slept in parks eating garbage for food. At 6 I was severely beaten and would have been dead if it wasn't for Kyuubi. I was also raped." He never got to finish as a pair of warm lips clamped down onto his. His eyes widened as he saw Ino crying with smeared mascara smashing her lips onto his. She opened her eyes and then wrapped her hands around her neck. He slipped his hands on her hips and pulled her onto his lap. After 3 minutes they both parted, gasping for air with slight pants. Ino watched into Naruto's eyes. Midnight blue. They were beautiful and had an almost unseeable twinkle in them. Only Ino could see it. She could see it because she was in love with him. He kissed him again, this time his bottom lip asking for entrance. He happily obliged and soon they were wrestling for dominance. Naruto won and his tongue was roaming her mouth and he was applying chakra to his tongue to add effect, making her moan into the kiss. Soon afterward they parted again. "That was awesome," he exclaimed with pants. She smiled and leaned on him once again. He smiled as he wrapped an arm around her waist and lay down. "Naruto-kun, please forgive me for how I treated you in the academy," she muttered under her breath in an attempt to keep him from hearing it. But he did. "Don't worry about it," he said, and she turned to him. "You were caught up in your fangirl stage," he said, and she smiled. She kissed his cheek and closed her eyes. "And thank you for accepting me as the Jinchuriki of a Biju that killed some of your family." She remained quiet. Ino. She was asleep, he figured out once looking into her face. He picked her up bridal style and dashed away to her house. Not a care in the world except for the beautiful young woman in his arms. Later. Yamanaka residence, Konohagakure. Inoichi and Hinata opened their front door to see an interesting sight. Naruto was holding Ino bridal style as she snuggled into his chest. But the most noticeable thing was the red eyes on Naruto and the smeared mascara on Ino's face. "You made my little princess cry?" Inoichi asked threateningly as he took a step forward only to be stopped by Hinata before he killed the last male senju alive. "No, I didn't, sir. I told her about the Kyuubi and how my life was before I was told about my senju title," he said, smiling down at Ino. "She cried for me," he said. Hinata and Inoichi smiled at their daughter's decision to stay by Naruto's side no matter what. Inoichi took his daughter from Naruto. He warned if he did anything perverted to her, he would castrate him then and there, but Naruto defended himself. Inoichi then walked inside to put Ino in her bed. Naruto then handed Hinata a note. "Can you give Ino this for me please when she wakes up?" Naruto asked and Hinata nodded and said good night. Naruto did the same and walked off. He smirked then jumped away with a shit-eating grin plastered on his face, and that wasn't all. While he was carrying Ino, she had said some interesting things in her sleep and the result ended in a certain appendage on Naruto to become stiff. Damn. He needed a cold shower. Later. Senju compound, Konohagakure. As Naruto walked out of the bathroom with a towel around his waist, he immediately noticed something odd in the design of the master bedroom. He didn't know why he didn't notice before, but then began to think. Then it hit him. He was so stressed into finding out who his father was he never really took in the interior of the master bedroom. There was a strange symbol on the wall above his head. He knew what it was now that he was studying it. A hexagram. He walked over and ran a hand on the seal, and it flowed and then part of the wall on the other side of the room parted. He quickly slipped on some underwear, some shorts and a shirt and went over to the parted wall. He slipped in and heard the wall close with a metallic clank behind him. He noticed that the room he was in was very dusty, so building up his chakra, he unleashed it sending all the dust away, and somehow the chakra blast acted as a light switch, and the light came on. The room was a 12 by 12 room with a glass case in the center to where 5 books were displayed. Using his sensory abilities he easily saw that the room was booby-trapped. So using his exceptional abilities in shadow clones, he sent the arrow to the room where it wasn't booby-trapped to see if there was a mechanism. He noticed that underneath the tiles on the ground were kanji for words. He then groaned. The tiles were pressure-activating tiles. Except the ones on the outside, of course. He then noticed there were some kanji printed on the glass class. It was a riddle he guessed simply by seeing how it was written, and then guessed the books were something of utmost importance. The riddle was as follows. There is a one-story house. Inside it were the following: a pink person, a pink cat, a pink fish, a pink computer, a pink chair, a pink table, a pink telephone, a pink shower. Everything was pink. What color were the stairs? Naruto began to ponder, then looked back at the kanji that was underneath the floor tiles. There were 4 words. Pink, blue, green and none. He then used his clones to think and finally came up with an answer. Using his ninja skills he jumped in the air and landed on the floor tile, with the kanji mark none. Come on, it wasn't that hard, the house is 1 story meaning no stairs. The glass case opened and Naruto went over to it and took out the 5 books. His eyes widened at what they were. They were journals. Journals of very important people. Shadai Hokage, Hashirama Senju. Uchiha clan head, Madara Uchiha. Nidaime Hokage, Tobirama Senju. Slug Sannin, Tsunade Senju. Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Chapter 006, Origins and Revelations. Naruto watched the books in awe and horror. He was in possession of the journals of 5 of the most powerful shinobi to ever have passed through Konohagakure. Naruto ran his hand along the seal that opened the door and it closed back. He then watched the books in front of him, all being journals of Konoha's most powerful shinobi in their prime. He was about to go in bed when a knock at his door stopped him in his tracks. He groaned and walked towards the door. He opened the door to see an Anbu with a Nico mask. "Yes?" he asked and then noticed the Anbu was a woman. She had long purple hair and a slim figure. She wore the standard Anbu outfit and stood at attention. "Senju-sama, Hokage-sama requests your presence tomorrow morning at 10. Her voice was soft like a woman's voice should be but stern to show her skill and non-existent fear. "Thanks, but isn't it really late?" he asked and she nodded her head no. "Hokage-sama had eyes on you since you left the Hokage monument with Ino Yamanaka," he said and his face gained a dark hue at the memory of kissing Ino. "Okay, dismissed," he said when he felt her get mischievous intent. Being a sensei came in handy. Not only could he sense chakra but emotions as well, and there was a whole set coming from him. Naruto closed the door and walked back up to his bedroom. He passed some maids on the way who were drinking tea and chatting, but he was sensing sadness from the youngest of the 4 maids. "Sadrina," Naruto called. The maids turned to him and Sadrina looked at him timidly. She wore a standard maid's dress and was 17 years old. Naruto gestured for her to come and she did. "Yes, Naruto-sama?" she asked once out of hearing range of the other maids. "What's wrong?" he asked and she shook his head vigorously. "Nothing's wrong." She lied and Naruto let out a sigh and walked away telling her to follow him. She said goodbye to the other maids and followed Naruto upstairs. Naruto entered his room leaving Sadrina to close the door behind her. He sat on his bed and gestured for her to sit on the chair in his room. She did so and waited for him to speak. "He left you, didn't he?" he asked and she burst into tears. Naruto sighed as he had hit the nail on the head. He had sensed a living being in her stomach and knew right away that her boyfriend had left her after finding out. He went over to her and began to rub her back as she began to let it out. From when she told him to what he did after the news was spilled. Apparently he had yelled and chewed her out for not using protection. "Naruto-sama, I've been considering abortion," she said only to have Naruto clamp his hands down on her shoulder and tears began to form in his eyes as he wondered what would Ino do if they were in this situation. "Sadrina," he said softly. "An abortion is 1 breath never taken, 2 eyes never seen and 1 dream never accomplished. I am not forcing you to keep the baby. If you want you can take an abortion, but if you choose to keep the baby I will put you on maternity leave and have one of my top maids look after you while you're pregnant," he explained and she cried into his chest. "Thank you Naruto-sama," she said. "No problem, so why don't you go tell the maids about it and the orders I have given to help you, you are their top priority and I want to carry you to old man Hiruzen in the morning," Naruto told her. She nodded happily and left the room. Naruto went and lay on his bed. He was about to go to sleep when he heard a rather annoying voice. "Hey kid, so I see you're going to adopt her into the Senju clan." The Kyuubi spoke in his mind making Naruto growl at the voice. He simply shook his head yes and awaited for Kyuubi to continue. "Tomorrow I start your training with the Sannin." Kyuubi's last words rang out in Naruto's head as Kyuubi's voice left him. Naruto was about to call out when he felt something or someone calling him. He looked around to see that one of the books he had found were glowing. He took it up and saw the name. Hashirama Senju. He opened and read. Hashirama Senju. This journal is about all of the elemental Kekkei Genkai and elemental Kekkei Mta I have come across or heard of in my time as a shinobi clan head Kage. Kekkei Genkai. Mokuton. The Mokuton or wood release is the ability to create wood at just a thought and use it to fight and or help in any way possible. The Mokuton is a Kekkei Janaki passed down through the Senju clan and is only accessible by male members of the clan. The user's body is also transformable into wood itself. The Mokuton also gives the user the special ability to subdue or calm down tailed beast. The elements for Mokuton are Suiton, the Yoten. The Yoten or lava release comes in one out of three forms. The first form being dry magma, this type of Yoten allows the user to use the magma as a glue-like substance. The second form is molten rocks, the rock are extremely hot and can melt through almost any surface, and the last is lava itself. The lava is known to be the hottest substance on the earth and can be dangerous when in close proximity. The elements for Yoten are Katen and Doten. Huten. Futen or vapor boil release is the ability to make any liquid in the user's presence become hot. The hot liquids have the ability to heat any surface and can boil up to 2000 degrees Celsius. The user's body can also be temporarily turned into a liquid form. The elements for Futen are Katen and Suiton. Hikten. The Hikten of ice release gives the user the ability to control form ice. It is known to be common among members of the Yuki clan, located in the land of snow. The user can also freeze water, even water from the Futen. The elements for Hikten are Fton and Suiton. Shakuton. The Shakuton or scorch release lets the user control scorched rock. Scorched rock is very hot and lets the user become invulnerable to any fire-based ninjutsu. The user also controls the temp's tire when scorch release is active. The elements for Shakuton are Katen and Fton. Honoton. The Honoton or a blaze release allows the user to be immune to all lightning-based ninjutsu and weak fire-based ninjutsu. The user has good control over fire when Honoton is active. It also increased the user's speed temporarily in exchange for strength. The elements for Honoton are Katen and Raiten. Jinten, Swift. The Jinten or Swift release gives the user an extreme speed boost in exchange for making them very weak physically. If the legendary Black Lightning is added to the Jinten it becomes super fast. When using Jinten the user breaks down their body's molecular particles and reforms them. The elements for Jinten, Swift are Fton and Raiten. Jiten. The Jiten or Magnet release gives the user the ability to control magnetism. When in use the user has an unbreakable magnetic field around him and once it enters they are able to control metals. The elements for Jiten are Fton and Doten. Bakuten. The Bakuten or explosive release is able to cause explosions anywhere the user desires. Though it is quite taxing on chakra reserves, it is very helpful as the opponent knows not where you will make explode. The elements for Bakuten are Raiten and Doten. Ranten. The Ranten or storm release is the ability to control clouds by sending water and lightning chakra into them, causing dark clouds, which are used to send lightning and water down on the field. The elements for Ranten are Raiten and Suiton. Hekate Jinten, dust. The Jinten or dust release is able to control the particles in the air. One Jinten jutsu can do like the swift release and break down your molecular level. The elements for Jinten are Katen, Fton and Doten. Shoten. The Shoten or crystal release users have the ability to make crystals. It is also used for sealing things within it. The elements for Shoten are Fton, Raiten and Doten. As he continued to read he couldn't help but feel intrigued by the book and continued to read. He soon found himself indulged in a book on nothing but Kekkei Genkai and Kekkei Mta. However, he only read out the parts and notes about elemental bloodlines, and now it was time to read on ninjutsus. Naruto, however, fell asleep as soon as he finished the elemental part of the book, but it wasn't an ordinary sleep. He was unconscious. He was in his mindscape. Mindscape, Naruto. Naruto opened his eyes to see himself in a forest. Well actually he was in a clearing that was surrounded by a forest. And you are? As he heard that he jumped 6 feet in the air and spun around to meet a face he never thought he would get to see in person. Hashirama Senju. Lord first were the only words to come out of his mouth in his shocked state. And you are? Hashirama simply asked again. Then Naruto Uzumaki Senju. Naruto introduced himself. Who are your parents? Hashirama asked with a raised brow. Kushina Uzumaki. Nidain Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko and my father is unknown to me, old man third wouldn't tell me, he told me to figure it out on my own. Naruto explained. Hashirama raised an eyebrow. Seemed like Hiruzen was still in power. Kushina you say that was my sister-in-law's granddaughter's name. Hashirama mused on. Nayla? He asked and Hashirama looked at him strangely. If I am here that means you cracked the first riddle, I suppose mine was the first one you picked up in the secret room. A nod. Well, the other books went back as they were not real, only the first was as real, so to get the others you have to crack more riddles and take the books one at a time, and each time here riddle gets harder. Hashirama explained with a grin. Wait. If this is the Shodai Hokage's personal notes on bloodlines, why wasn't the riddle hard? Only someone of the writer's blood can actually access the room and or read it. Hashirama explained. Then two wooden chairs sprouted from the ground. Hashirama sat in one and gestured for the younger of the two senjus to sit on the other, and when Naruto did so, Hashirama took out a book out of his pocket. This book has all of the wood release techniques I developed and learned over the years. I am entrusting it to you. I believe you will be a great shinobi one day. Having Mokuton and being a Jinchuriki is a very good combination. When times come to control the Kyuubi, it will help. Hashirama said and then began to fade away. Thank you, Hashirama-sama. Naruto said before the man known as the Shodai Kami no Shinobi was gone. Naruto soon felt himself being pulled away and decided he would have a talk with Kyuubi tomorrow, and he was gone. Following day. Senju compound, Konohagakure. The sound of knocking on his bedroom door awoke Naruto from his slumber. He groaned and sat up as he looked at the time. 9 o'clock. He answered the knock with a "Come in, Sadrina." "Morning, Naruto-sama, you told me that you wanted to take me to the Hokage this morning, but you didn't say a time." She explained to him and he held up one finger. "I have to be there in 1 hour for a meeting, so you'll come with me," he told her. She nodded and left. Naruto, not able to go back to sleep, rose from his bed and went into the shower. When he came back out to get ready, a cloud of smoke interrupted his thoughts. He turned to where the smoke started and saw Naila there standing with a giant scroll. "Naila. Hello, Naruto-san, I have come here for a reason, so please pay attention." At this, Naruto's head shot to her and all attention was paid. Uzumakis have the special ability to turn their bodies into serpents. We can do this because it is a special ability of us having the Serpent Clan summoning scroll. She explained. "How come I didn't read that in the history books about the Uzumaki clan?" he asked. "We never let that information out into the open. The only person outside of being an Uzumaki who knew this information was the first, second, third and fourth Hokages. How did the fourth know this?" She grinned. "You'll figure it out soon enough. Anyway, being the last known Uzumaki, I have come for you to sign it, but this is different from other summoning scrolls. When you do it, a serpent tattoo will come on your hand," was her explanation. "This is awesome, being able to summon and turn into a serpent." He mused on and on, only to be stopped by a forced cough from Naila, who glared at him. She held out the scroll and explained to him how to sign it. Once his blood was on the scroll, it glowed, and then the blood went onto his right hand and formed a serpent from his wrist to his shoulder. The blood faded away and the serpent became green and blue. "You are now able to summon serpents in water and turn into one, but turning into one has stages. This book has everything you need to know about the serpents and their jutsus and styles," she explained, handing him a green book. He took it and she was gone in another cloud of smoke. With a shrug, Naruto placed the book on the bed and went to get his new ninja gear out of his closet. He had only been using the Odyssey until the ninja store was finished with this, and he was finally going to wear it, but he needed to make a few adjustments. Naruto made the adjustments and donned his clothes. He wore a full body mesh suit with the right sleeve missing. Over that he wore the rust orange ninja shirt with a turtleneck with the left sleeve long with black flames trimming the bottom and in the right sleeve non-existent, so his tattoo was in plain sight. His pants were the standard long ninja pants with black flames, also the bottom of the pants sleeve, and the flames reached his shin. He had a white bandages wrapped around his right thigh and had a kunai and shuriken holder filled with weapons. On his black belt was 2 pouches. One had his Icha book and the book about the serpents. He put on his black ninja sandals and strapped his black headband to his forehead. Naruto smirked at his appearance and was about to go downstairs when Ino walked into her room with the note he had told Hinata to give her. "Hey, Ino-chan," he said as he walked closer to her. She blushed and walked up to him and kissed him on the lips. "Hello, your maids told me you had a meeting with Sandame-sama, so I just thought I would pass by before I went to training," she said, then gave him the note. "Isn't this the note I have Hinata sent to give you?" he asked, and she nodded and hugged him. "I'd love to be your girlfriend," she said. Naruto smiled and kissed her forehead. "Thank you," he said. "I would love to spend time with you, but after training with Jiraiya-sensei," he said. She nodded at this, and then she noticed the serpent tattoo. "What's this?" she asked, running her hand along it. Naruto sighed and explained the meeting with Naila, and she nodded. She kissed his cheeks and bade him goodbye, but as she was walking out she added a little swig to her hips teasingly. Naruto groaned, which made her laugh. She blew him a kiss and left, leaving Naruto to finish get ready. He then smirked. He would get Ino back. Later. Hokage's office, Konohagakure. "Come in." Naruto entered the Hokage's office to see something he would consider interesting. Hiruzen was smoking his pipe, which was natural, but he didn't expect to see the Haika clan's 10 council elders, the head of the clan and his 2 daughters. Naruto just stood by the door and then looked at Hiruzen, who was looking right back at him. He shrugged it off and went to sit on the other side of the room away from everybody. This better be important or I'm never going to tell the old man the secret to paperwork, plus Adrena's waiting outside for me to finish. Naruto thought with a slight chuckle, causing everyone in the room to look at him. Something you'd like to share, Naruto? Hiruzen asked, and Hinata, Hiashi's older daughter's head shot up with wide eyes and a dark blush on her face. I was just thinking about if I was called here for something unimportant, I wouldn't tell the old man the secret to paperwork. Naruto said, and Hiruzen's eyes widened as he turned to the Hyugas. Hiashi, this better be goddamned important. Hiruzen warned, and Hiashi remained impassive. Hiashi then noticed his daughter was blushing in Naruto's presence and smirked. This would make things easier. Naruto dono, I am sure you remember Hinata from the academy, and Tai is my youngest daughter Hanabi. Hiashi introduced, and the Hyuga council moved to the side. Hey Hinata, Hanabi. Naruto said plainly. Hello, Naruto-sama. Hanabi said as she stood and bowed. Please just call me Naruto. Naruto said, and she nodded. Hello, and then Naruto-kun. Hinata said as she too stood and bowed deeply, almost falling over. Just call me Naruto. He said. Alright, I want to get on with this as I have much more important things to discuss with Naruto. Hiruzen explained and gestured for Hiashi to begin. Naruto dono. Hiashi began. I wish to discuss the future of our clans by proposing a marriage contract between Hinata and yourself. Hinata and Hanabi had wide eyes, while Naruto seemed to be choking on air. Sorry, but I can't do that. Naruto said after regaining his composure. Hinata had tears welling in her eyes, and Hanabi started to glare at Naruto, while Hiashi and the council were seething with rage. Why is that? I assure you Hinata is a very beautiful young woman and will make you happy and will satisfy your needs, Hiashi said, and Naruto's face turned into one of disgust. He stood and walked right in front of Hiashi. Are you implying that I would just use Hinata as a sex slave? Naruto asked lowly. She will be your wife, last time I checked it was a wife's job to please her husband. Hiashi said with his usual stoic face. Naruto let out a sigh and rubbed his temples. Your request has been denied, I have a girlfriend and am really happy with my life as it is. Naruto explained, and Hinata began to cry. All of the members of the room saw this. Ni-chan, what's wrong? Hanabi asked. Truth was she knew what was wrong. She was seething in rage at Naruto for denying the request. Hinata simply got up and ran out the door, and a woman walked in with a perplexed look on her face. The fuck was that about? Naruto inwardly asked himself. He watched as the rest of the Hyugas angrily bid him and Hiruzen farewell and left. Naruto turned to Hiruzen, who looked just as perplexed as Naruto, and shrugged. He decided to keep his mouth quiet. Just as Hiruzen was about to continue, a figure burst through the door. He was short, about 9 years old, and had a long scarf with wooden shuriken in his hand. I've got you, no old man. He exclaimed and ran at Hiruzen only to trip on his scarf, making everyone's sweat drop. He got up and looked around. He then pointed an accusing finger at Naruto. It was you who tripped me. He exclaimed, and Naruto groaned and picked the boy up by the front of his shirt and glared at him. Don't get on my nerves, boy. Naruto said, and a figure appeared in the doorway. Senju-sama, please put down the honorable grandson. A man known as Abisu said, and Naruto looked at the boy in his hand. That's right, I'm Konohamaru Sarutobi, grandson of the Sandaime Hokage. He exclaimed only to get a clout to the back of his head. I don't care who you are, if we were to play by nobility, I would have you outnumbered, being related to all 4 Kages except Old Man Third. Naruto said with a tick mark. Naruto placed Konohamaru down on the ground, and Konohamaru went on and on about people only seeing him as the grandson of the third and not as himself. How about this, kid? I'll teach you a jutsu that can make you beat the old man in a flash. Naruto exclaimed. You will not teach him that jutsu or you'll be stuck doing D ranks for the rest of your life as a genin. Hiruzen said, and Naruto paled. Naruto dismissed Konohamaru, but not before whispering something to him that only Sadrina saw. Alright, old man, what's so important? Jiraiya regrets to inform you that you can't be his apprentice. Hiruzen stated. What? Why? He has a spy network to run, so you will be placed on a team, but he will train you when possible. He will actually be training you for the next 2 weeks, and then you will be placed on a team, and he will train you when he has time. Naruto groaned and then introduced Sadrina and told Hiruzen about her problem. Soon afterward, Sadrina was Naruto's newly adopted older sister. Naruto had dismissed Sadrina home and was chatting lightly with an anxious Hiruzen. For what he was anxious for, Naruto didn't know, and he then decided to ask. Hey old man, what's wrong? You look anxious. Naruto asked on worry. What's the secret to paperwork? Naruto let out a chuckle as he stood up and walked to the door. He placed his hands on the handle and opened the door. Right before he exited, he said 2 words Hiruzen heard clearly. Shadow clones. It hit Hiruzen like a ton of bricks and Naruto was gone. Outside of the door, Naruto began to count with a chuckle and a smirk apparent on his face as he waited. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now. I'm free. Chapter 007, Jealousy and the Truth. After hearing enough of the Hokage going on about he defeated his mortal enemy Naruto decided he would head straight home and start training with Jiraiya. As he walked through the streets of Konoha people smiled at him nervously while others continued to glare at him. He chuckled slightly. He knew why they either glared or smiled nervously. Some were smiling nervously because Naruto could have all of them killed where they stood. Dating back to the time of the Shaddai he had made a law stating that if anyone harmed a clan heir their punishment is up to the heir. The others were glaring because they still saw him as the Kyuubi. For 14 years he was tormented and abused because of the fox in his stomach. Even now, being the heir to one of Konoha's 2 founding clans didn't mean a rat's ass. The day had been such a headache for Naruto. First Ino had teased him in a seductive way, he had to deal with the Hyugas, get threatened to do D-rank mission his entire ninja career and Hinayana crying. He still didn't understand. Letting out a sigh he tried to contact Kyuubi mentally. Over the past couple of days he had found out he could contact Kyuubi by just thinking. In his mind Kyuubi's eyes opened. "What do you want, kid?" Kyuubi asked, his voice deep and demonic. "Kid?" Naruto asked with a raised brow and a tick mark on his forehead. "What about it?" "For some reason I just called you it. I think it has to do with the Bijk's mentality. I think we see our Jinchurikis as our own, but I never called your mother it though." Kyuubi explained and Naruto shrugged internally. "What was Kachan like?" He asked softly with a hint of satisfaction at finally having someone to call Kachan, despite said person being dead and gone forever. "She was annoying, brash, liked bright colors and a complete and utter idiot just like you." Kyuubi said darkly, making Naruto chuckle. He was just like his weight. "Hey. I'm not an idiot and I highly doubt Kachan was one." He exclaimed and Kyuubi began to snicker at Naruto. "I never really talked to her. Every time I would pull her in here, she would just tell me to stay out of her life and pretend that I wasn't there." Kyuubi said plainly. Naruto shook his head. As he looked around he realized he was in a part of town he was very familiar with. Getting a shit-eating grin he dashed away to his favorite ramen stand. Minutes later he flopped down onto a stool where a certain old man and his daughter served ramen. "Hey Ni-chan, old man." He called as he leaned on the counter, anticipation clear on his face. "Hey Naruto." A brown-haired young adult said as she leaned on the counter as well. "You haven't been here in a week, how are things with the clan?" she asked. "It's a pain really," he admitted. "The Hyugas tried to marry me and Hinata Hyuga," he said with a sigh. "Did you accept?" she asked slowly. "I know she's beautiful," AM said, remembering that she had caught the young Hyuga staring at Naruto with her Byakugan. "No," he answered plainly. "I kind of already have a girlfriend," Naruto explained and AM squealed in delight. "Her name is Ino Yamanaka," he said. "That's great," she exclaimed. "But I think Hinata actually liked you, I saw her watching you when we were in your 4th year at the academy," she explained and Naruto rose a brow. "She stalked me?" he asked. "Kind of, but she did admit that she liked you," AM said, remembering the moment 2 years ago. "And I actually told her I would help her get to go out with you," she admitted, making Naruto groan. "If she had been watching me since I was 12 years old, why didn't she help me when the villagers would beat me?" Naruto asked, angrily slamming his fist on the counter. "Calm down Naruto," AM said. Naruto simply got up and walked away and he didn't even order his ramen. AM looked down sadly. Naruto was right. Shrugging, she decided she would stay out of Naruto's romance life and apologize later. Turning around she went in the back to relax as her father wasn't here. Later. Senju compound, Konohagakure. Naruto entered the backyard training ground to find Jiraiya already there sitting in a tree. He walked to the tree and walked up using the application of chakra to his feet. "Let's start," Naruto said. Jiraiya eyes him curiously and shrugged. He jumped down the tree, followed shortly by Naruto. Walking to the center of the field, Jiraiya told Naruto to sit on the ground. "First thing first, we are going to go over every single thing you learned on your own, then we are going to fix your taijutsu, and I'm going to give you your mother katana for kinjutsu, fuinjutsu will also be trained into the fullest extent, and lastly we are going to train in elemental manipulation, all of this will be done while wearing heavy weight," Jiraiya explained and Naruto shrugged. "Let's get to it," he said, standing up and dusting off his clothes. As soon as he was about to walk towards Jiraiya when a gut-wrenching pain shot throughout his body. Red chakra began to shroud his body. Jiraiya grew wide eyes and pulled out a fuinjutsu paper that would stop the demonic chakra. However, before he could do anything the chakra left Naruto's body. It formed a body-like form next to Naruto and a human form began to come into place. When it was done the person had crimson hair that reached the middle of his back and stood at 5 feet 5 inches tall. His clothes were not seamed but he had on a black cloak with the kanji for Kaiu or 9 on his back. "You are?" Jiraiya asked as he moved Naruto away from the being and placed him on the side as he was unconscious. The man with the crimson hair walked over to Naruto and withdrew a book from his weapon holder. "I am the Kyuubi in human form," he said, and Jiraiya dropped his jaw. I am here to help train Naruto. This book is a journal on Kekkei Genkai and Kekkei Tenta left by the Shodai. Kyuubi said, throwing the book to Naruto. Jiraiya caught the book but kept an eye on the supposed Kyuubi in human form. Jiraiya glanced at the book and his eyes widened marginally. How did Naruto have this book? How does the Gaki have this problem book? Jiraiya asked. Inside his bedroom is a secret room. In that room there are 4 more books, one from Madara Uchiha, Kyuubi said with venom in his voice. Tobirama Senju, Tsunade Senju and Minato Namikaze. This is the first one he took. Jiraiya whistled. We can't let anyone except the Hokage know about this. My guess is that the others have some form of notes in them. Jiraiya mused. When the kid wakes up we will be starting his training. Firstly we have to activate his bloodlines. Kyuubi explained and Jiraiya only nodded and gazed. 10 minutes later Naruto grunted as he woke up. He looked around to see Jiraiya and Kyuubi reading the journal that belonged to Hashirama Senju. He looked at the crimson-haired man. Who are you? He asked and both looked at him. Time to tell the truth. Kyuubi said, raising eyebrows. I am Kurama. I was trying to get out to help train Naruto, but something went completely wrong. Kurama said. I am the Kyuubi, by the way. Naruto dropped his jaw. What? He asked softly. Alright, listen carefully as I'm only explaining this once. They nodded. I am about 16 years old as you see me here. Technically I am part of the Kyuubi. When the Yondaime sealed me into Naruto he had split my chakra from my soul, however, he sealed the chakra into myself and the soul in himself as the Shinigami took him. I am literally the Kyuubi in human form, but I will remain out here with everyone else until I die mortally. I have about 3 taels worth of the demonic chakra, while Naruto has the other 6. Kurama explained, and they took it in bit by bit. So let me get this straight. Jiraiya said and both turned to him. You are the Kyuubi in human form, Kurama, you have 3 out of 9 taels of demonic chakra, you are about 16 years of age, and will die mortally like everyone else in the world. Kurama nodded. But there's more, I have about a Chunin level chakra, and I know absolutely nothing ninja-wise. He finished and flopped down onto the grass. That's hardcore. Naruto said as he stood up. Listen to my plan, guys. Naruto said and they paid full attention. We get the old man to make him a genin and he comes on my team, get him some new clothes, and since he is technically human. A girlfriend. Naruto finished and Kurama shrugged nonchalantly. Are you crazy? Jiraiya shouted. He could be lying to get information on to destroy the village. Jiraiya said, pointing accusingly at Kurama, who groaned. He's telling the truth. Naruto said simply. I'm an Uzumaki, I can sense all feeling and how much chakra a person or thing has, the only thing I can't feel is personal emotions such as love and jealousy. He explained. Jiraiya eyed Kurama carefully, then activated his own sensor abilities. They may not have been as good or awesome as Naruto's, but they could sense his chakra level. After confirming his chakra level to be Chunin level, Jiraiya took out a kunai and threw it at Kurama, who barely caught it. He looked at Jiraiya and rose a brow. You said you didn't know anything. Jiraiya said as he too stood up. I'm going to train you in everything you need to be considered a genin, you will have to earn our trust however. Jiraiya said lowly. How am I going to earn your trust? Kurama asked with a raised eyebrow. By protecting Naruto no matter what, since he isn't technically a Jinchurikis anymore, he can die and you live, you must protect him from any and all threats. Jiraiya explained and Naruto only smirked. You mean like how he placed a Jinjutsu on the Senju compound since I arrived because Danzum's men have been watching? Naruto asked, making Jiraiya's eyes widened. What? The kid's right. Kurama said. Danzum's route are still up and running. Kurama said. Before you ask, I know because when Naruto was a couple months old I heard you and the Holage talking about it from inside of Naruto. Kurama let out a sigh. Let's get to training, shall we? I can't stand the thought of the kid being stronger than me. Kurama said with a chuckle. Naruto and Kurama smirked at each other. Competition clear in Naruto's midnight blue eyes and Kurama's crimson red eyes. Jiraiya chuckled. He was going to enjoy this. Later. Hokage Tower, Konohagakure. Naruto and Kurama walked up the stairs towards Hiruzen's office. Both exhausted from 7 hours of training. After training they took a bath, got new clothes for Kurama, and left the Senju compound. Kurama wore a black undershirt with a crimson jacket over it. The crimson jacket was long-sleeved with black lines running along the sleeve. His pants were long standard ninja pants but was in a crimson color. He had a weapons holder in his left thigh and his ninja sandals were black. He was by all standards eye candy for almost all of the girls in Konoha with his deep red eyes, toned skin and 5 foot 5 inches frame. Naruto was just as much as eye candy as Kurama was, but Naruto was 5 feet 1 inch tall. Reaching Hiruzen's office, Kurama was going to knock, but Naruto opened the door and walked in, making Kurama groan. He followed Naruto in and hit him upside the head. Baka. Kurama scolded. This is the office of one of the most strongest shinobi in the world and you just barge in unannounced. he said angrily and Naruto shrugged. No way this old man could possibly be that strong. Naruto said as he turned back to Hiruzen who had been watching them fight like brothers. His face then turned serious and he turned to Kurama. Jiraiya told me the rundown version of this entire escapade. He explained. Give me your version. He then demanded of Kurama. He took a puff of his pipe and waited for Kurama to begin. Privacy seal please. Kurama instructed. Hiruzen did it and then waited. Like the pervert said, I am the Kyuubi in human form, but I am technically human, I have 3 out of the 9 tails of demonic chakra, leaving Naruto with the rest. He went on to explain. I can die mortally like humans do, Naruto is not considered a Jinchuriki anymore, I want to become a Konohinin to protect Naruto. He finished. Hiruzen took it all in and blew out some smoke. How did you come out of the seal Minato placed on Naruto? He asked with a serious gaze towards Kurama. Being sealed inside 2 Uzumakas before Naruto has its perks. Kurama said with a shrug. Being in Mito and Kushina I knew a great deal of Uzumaki seals and I used the 4-sign seal to undo the 8-sign seal, but something went wrong, I know absolutely nothing ninja related and want to be a genin. He said and shuddered at the thought of doing D-ranked missions. So Hiruzen began slowly. You're telling me that had you escaped the seal fully you would have enough power to level the village? He said and Kurama shook his head negatively. If I had come out fully I would have caged to infinite chakra reserves, know a good amount of stuff and 1 or 2 ninjutsu. He answered and Hiruzen nodded. Being the good-natured man he was Hiruzen took out a Konoha headband and threw it at Kurama who caught it and grinned cheekily. He strapped it around his forehead. I need you to tell me your age, height, weight, blood type and name. Hiruzen said taking out a notepad and a brush with ink on it ready to write. Kurama cleared his throat. 16, 5 foot 4 inches, 117 pounds, B and Kurama Tsutsuki. Kurama said and Hiruzen shook his head and wrote down almost everything. You can't go by the name Otsutsuki, if Dansum found out you were the Kyuubi he would freak, so you'll go by Kurama just Kurama. Hiruzen said and Kurama shrugged and glanced over to Naruto who was sleeping on a couch. Baka. He grumbled and woke him up. What? He asked. Let's go. Kurama said walking towards the door. Naruto grumbled, bid Hiruzen goodbye and left with Kurama. Hiruzen let out a chuckle. He then made 2 shadow clones, he sent it to do paperwork while he pulled out a certain orange-covered book. The only that was heard in the office were perverted giggles of a man known as the Sandame Hokage, Kami no Shinobi and the professor. Damn. The world has come to strong shinobi being perverts. What a shame. Meanwhile. Elsewhere, Kanahagakure, a certain Haika calmly staked towards a certain pink-haired Kunoichi's residence. This Haika had the standard white Haika eyes with a tint of lavender on it. And she was furious and depressed. The love of her life. Naruto Uzumaki had denied a marriage contact with her for some skank. She was going to find out who the sunk was and fight her fair and square for Naruto maybe. Upon reaching her destination she knocked on the front door 3 times. She heard some voices inside and the shuffling of feet on carpet, a cheap carpet, not the expensive ones her clan had. The door opened to reveal Sakura Haruno. She wore a pink dress with green-black biker shirts, she had her head tied around her head and wore the standard shinobi sandals. Hinata? She asked in mild shock and complete surprise. What are you doing here? Sakura scratched her chin. I need you help. She replied firmly. My beloved Naruto-kun has a girlfriend and I need to know who it is. She said and Sakura was in shock. She opened her mouth to speak, but yes, Naruto-kun has a girlfriend and I want to find it who the skank is. She finished. Actually. Sakura began. If Naruto Baka has a girlfriend that means he will ask me out less and there will be less competition for Sasuke-kun. She said with a shrug. Did you know that Naruto is also the Senju clan heir? Hinata asked. What? Sakura screeched. My mother only told me that there was a clan heir for the Senju, but she didn't tell me a name. Sakura yelled. Mom, I'll be back. She exclaimed as she walked out of the door. Hinata smirked and strode off with Samira by her side. Soon afterward they had round up all of the clan heirs. Even Sasuke, but they didn't have Ino though. She was Hinata's next target, but after an hour of searching and not finding her, they headed to the compound of the Senju clan. They had found Kiba in Yuzuka playing with his partner and best friend. Akamaru in the park, she had asked him to join and he had said he would be glad to help. Shino and Sasuke joined because Shino wanted to congratulate Naruto on becoming a clan heir and Sasuke because he wanted to see if Naruto was really the heir to the Senju clan. Shikamaru and Shinji joined because they wanted to see the face on the others when they found out who exactly Naruto's girlfriend was. This was going to be fun. Walking towards the Senju compound the group of 7 genin and a ninkin were quiet. Sakura was restraining herself from jumping Sasuke and asking him out on dates. Arriving at the gates they saw 2 guards standing at attention. They turned their attention to Hinata who was at the head of the group. One of the guards locked gazes with the Haika and the other spoke. Why are you here, Haika-san, Akamichi-san, Inyazuka-san, Aburam-san, Ichiha-san, Nara-san, Haruno-san? A guard named Kamachi asked the visitors. That's Haika-sama, Ichiha-sama. Came the voices of Sasuke and Hinata at the same time. You know, a voice rung out all around them. Kamachi and Hiroshima only answered to me or the third. A figure said as it came into view behind them. It turned out to be Naruto, Ino and Kurama. Naruto-kun. Hinata exclaimed happily. Naruto's gaze fell on everyone. He watched as Shikamaru and Shinji were not interested in him and were gazing at clouds and munching on chips. Kiba was shocked along with Sasuke and Sakura, and finally Shino remained impassive. Why are you all here? Naruto asked, breaking the awkward silence that had befallen the group of genin. The guards had returned to their guarding and didn't pay attention to the teenagers' conversation. I came because Hinata asked for my help and I heard that there was a Senju clan heir, didn't know it would be you though. Kiba said and Akamaru barked in agreement. I came to congratulate you. Why? Because it is a good thing to do among fellow clan heirs. Shino answered, making Naruto's sweat drop. I wanted to see if you were really the clan heir of a clan that rivals the Uchiha. Sasuke said cockily. The Senju clan doesn't rival the Uchiha clan, the Uchiha clan is 10 times stronger than the Senju. Naruto said and Sasuke smirked. Bazinga. Naruto yelled and burst into laughter. What? Practically every asked. That was what Naruto likes to call Bazinga, he says every time he's joking. Kurama said and everyone except Sasuke and Sakura chuckled. And you are? Sasuke spat angrily. Naruto's best friend. Kurama answered with an innocent smile. Anyway, I'm not prepared to have guests, you all might as well head back home. Naruto said as he walked in. Shikamaru, Shinji, you can come, thought, my chef's cooking ramen. Naruto said and they shrugged and began to follow him. Can I come to Naruto-kun? Hinata asked. No. Naruto said and walked away. Wait. Hinata exclaimed and Naruto turned to her. Why does Ino, Shikamaru and Shinji get to go and this new friend of yours? Hinata asked angrily. Well, Kurama actually live with me, Shika and Shinji get to come because they're my girlfriend's best friends and Ino, well, she's my girlfriend. He said and jaws hit the ground, almost causing an earthquake. Any more questions? Sasuke grunted and walked away, while Shino bid everyone goodbye and left. Kiba said he'd see Naruto tomorrow and only Sakura and Hinata remained. Sakura walked up to Ino and smiled a small smile. Hey Ino, since we aren't competing for Sasuke-kun's love anymore, why don't we hang out sometime and you can tell me how you and Naruto Baku got together? Sakura said with a snicker. One condition. Ino said. Being? Call him a baka again and I'll kill you, but sure, we can meet at Ichiraku Ramen tomorrow at 1 in the afternoon. Ino said and Sakura paled and nodded vigorously because the way Ino said that made her scared. She smiled and left. Why? Hinata asked angrily, activating her Byakugan and slipping into the gentle fist stance. Why would you go out with a no-good fangirl instead of me, a princess of Konoha? She yelled. Enough, Hinata. Leave. Naruto ordered and Hinata charged at Ino. She sent a palm strike for her chest and she narrowly avoided it. I love him. Hinata said softly, but they heard. The guards were going to stop them, but Naruto waved them off. I love him and you always went after the Uchiha. I watched him from far, I was the only person who cared about him. Hinata yelled. I love Naruto too. Ino yelled and Naruto went wide eyes along with Shika and Shinji. I'm never letting Naruto go. We share a bond I won't let anyone sever. Ino yelled as she too slid into a stance. If you love him so much, why didn't you help him when he needed help? And I've given up on the Uchiha. Ino yelled. I rather die than give up Naruto so easily. They were about to charge when Naruto with the help of a shadow clone knocked them unconscious. He gave the clones orders to carry Hinata home and explain while he carried Ino home with Shikamaru and Shinji. The clone nodded and left. Kurama bid them good night and went upstairs. Think she'll remember any of it? Naruto asked softly as he picked her up bridal style. Maybe. Shikamaru said and Naruto sighed deeply. Let's get her home. Shinji said with a munch of chips after every word. The other two nodded and the three walked off heading towards the Yamanaka residence. As they walked, Naruto could only think of 3 words said just minutes ago. I love Naruto, letting out a sigh as he kissed her on her forehead and fixed her in his arms. Maybe I'll be able to love someday. Chapter 008, How It All Happened. Senju and Uchiha. Naruto sat in a tree branch with his feet swinging below him as he watched Kurama spar against Shikamaru and Ino against Shinji. It had been a week since the Rookie 9 finding out about his relationship status with Ino and Hinata's outburst. He was kind of glad and partly sad that Ino had forgotten about her confession. Glad because he didn't think he was ready for that kind of relationship, and sad because she might not have meant it and couldn't clarify if she mean it or not. She had forgotten because Naruto had hit a part of her neck that was connected to the temporal lobe of the brain. The temporal lobe was the part of the brain where memories were kept. As for Shikamaru and Shinji, After the outburst a week ago they had started to train with them despite Shikamaru's complaints about it being too, how should I put this, never mind, I'm going with it straightforward. He found it troublesome. Over the past week training with Jiraiya proved to be a pain in the ass. He had accomplished the first stage in controlling the 5 elements, activated his Kekkei Jinkase, but his Kekkyotamta remained untouched. As for the Yoten, Shakuten, Ranten, Hikuten and Mokuten. He didn't know any justice for them, but he did know how to use it and could make lava, scorched rock, small storms and small glaciers. From Mokuten he could grow trees. He knew Shadow Clone, Transformation, Substitution and Summoning. Jiraiya had let him sign the summoning scroll, and he had been practicing for a week without making anything bigger than toad the size of medium-sized stone. Kurama knew Shadow Clone, Transformation, Substitution, and also had the summoning. Unsurprisingly he could summon foxes despite being one himself and was highly skilled in Genjutsu. As for their Taijutsu, Naruto had learned the main Taijutsu styles of both the Uzumaki and Senju clans. Kurama had developed his own style which he named Kitsune. Naruto had kept his ninja outfit but had made some adjustments. He now had an extra pouch for his Fuinjutsu equipment and on his back was a sheath for his mother's katana which he had been given. Letting out a sigh he leaned back and fell over only to end up hanging upside down from the tree by bending his knees around the tree branch. He was currently remembering the reports his shadow clones had gotten. After Hinata's outburst he had began using his shadow clones to spy on everyone in the village. He had learned that Sasuke had upgraded his training regime and Hinata had become stronger with the help of every Hika on the Hika compound. His body began to sway as the cool breeze of midday blew. Grunting he leaned back then forward quickly, which in turn made him catapult from the tree branch into the center of the training ground, located at the Senju compound, and his sudden appearance stopped the spars that were ongoing. The other watched as he stretched and yawned. He turned his head towards the back door of his house. He turned to face the door and sat down on the ground cross-legged. "What's the point of hiding from me, Jiraiya-sensei?" He called out and everyone turned to him and then to the door and sat down as well as they knew he was right. Jiraiya grumbled about no good apprentices and came out of the door with a scroll in his hand. He walked up to them and threw the scroll at Kurama who caught it easily. "That scroll has the Shunshin no Jutsu, I want you to learn it and help Ino, Shikamaru and Shinji do it, I will teach Naruto it as I have something new for him to learn," he explained. Kurama shrugged and stood up. He beckoned for the Ino Shikacho formation to follow, and they did, but not before Ino have Naruto a quick kiss on his cheek. He blushed as Jiraiya snickered and giggled pervertedly. He glared at the pervert as a wooden stump came up and stopped mere femtometers away from his pride and joy. An femtometer is one of the world's smallest unit of measurement. Jiraiya gulped as the piece of wood started to ease back down into the ground until it was gone, and Naruto stood up with a grunt and walked to Jiraiya. "What's this jutsu you want to teach me?" Naruto asked. Jiraiya held out his right hand and a blue spiraling sphere formed in the palm of his hand. Naruto watched in awe as Jiraiya charged a tree and slammed the sphere into it. The tree dented until it broke in half and splinters were sent everywhere. With a smirk Jiraiya dusted himself and walked back to the awestruck Naruto. The Rasengan, an A-rank ninjutsu created by the Yondaime Hokage, Minato, spent 3 years developing the Rasengan, it took me a year to learn it. Jiraiya explained. It has 3 stages. The first step is learning how to burst a water balloon by spinning the water inside in multiple directions at once using only your chakra, which emphasize rotation. In order to complete this process, it is crucial that you are aware of the natural rotation of your chakra. The second step is for you to burst a rubber ball. Since rubber is thicker and air is completely different from water, it forces you to use denser chakra to break it. This step emphasized power. The third and final step was to combine steps 1 and 2 by spinning chakra inside a balloon without moving the balloon itself, emphasizing stability of the sphere. Jiraiya finished and Naruto rose a brow. He easily had took it all in and understood it all except for one thing. Natural rotation of chakra? He asked curiously. Yes. Jiraiya said then took his hand and ruffled Naruto's hair and saw his scalp. The way a person's hair rotates is the way his or her chakra rotates, so knowing that yours rotates clockwise will be a good help when learning the Rasengan. Jiraiya explained. Naruto fixed his hair and grumbled. How do I do the first step? He asked and his answer was a water balloon in his face. He took it and looked up at Jiraiya. You remember the steps? He asked and Naruto nodded. Water balloon is first, contact me when you complete it. Jiraiya said and disappeared in a shunshin, but not before throwing a scroll at Naruto's feet with the kanji for body flicker on it. Naruto sighed and took a seat on the lush grass of the training ground of his house. To his right were the others practicing the shunshin though they couldn't see each other, but Naruto could sense them. Letting out a groan he stood back up and began spinning the chakra in the water balloon. Hop. He grumbled. This was going to be long. Later. Council room, Konohagakure. Heroes impatiently awaited the clan heads to arrive. The civilians were here already as they didn't have much to do like clan heads. Dansum and his teammates were also there staring him down as if it was Naruto and the last bowl of ramen in the world. Letting out a groan, he reclined in his seat and yawned. He had been comfortably reading in his office when Dansum had called the council together. I hope my successor changes these old farts. He thought to himself as he thought about the amount of power the elders and Dansum abused for their own personal gain. He knew why Dansum had called the meeting. He had been watching Naruto and Kurama train through his crystal ball and remembered that Kurama had left the compound without the genjutsu yesterday. So Dansum was going to go on and on about him being a threat to Naruto, but all Dansum really cared about was the giant fox with 9 tails in Naruto's gut, or at least Dansum thought it was there. He chuckled, making him gain the attention of the elders and civilians. They all looked at him with raised eyebrows, and the civilians shrugged, but the elders glared harder. "What's so funny, Hiruzen?" Dansum asked sternly, and Hiruzen chuckled some more, and the clan heads came into the room, all except Hiashi. Hiruzen gained a worried expression as he had watched the altercation with the Haika heiress and the Yamanaka heiress, but he was happy with Naruto's decision in the end. Hiashi came in minutes later with a smirk on his face. He didn't even give an apology for being late. He simply went and sat in his seat with the smirk still apparent on his face. "Okay." Hiruzen began as he leaned on his elbows. "Dansum called this meeting, so he will bring his matter forward first, then I shall go as I also have some things to discuss with you all." Hiruzen said and waved a hand, giving Dansum the permission to proceed. Dansum stood up. His bandaged arm and bandaged right eye clear for all to see, he leaned on his cane and cleared his throat as if he was about to give a speech after becoming the godame. "I have witnessed a strange person entering and exiting the Senju compound lately. He has crimson red hair, wears red clothing, he looks to be about 15 years old and has a Konoha headband. I demand an explanation," Dansum said firmly, and everyone turned to Hiruzen to see his response. Hiruzen was normally a man to let things slide, but things changed. After all, this was the first council meeting since Naruto's Senju clan title became known, and Hiruzen had made a promise to Minato and Kushina to protect their son, and if Kurama was protecting Naruto, he would protect Kurama at all cost. "Firstly," Hiruzen said sternly, making everyone pale at the mere amount of killing intent he unleashed with that one word. "You do not demand anything from me, I am the Hokage, I demand of you, as for the person you saw." He paused for a moment and seemed to be mulling over something in his mind. "Is Kurama?" he finished. He had been considering calling Kurama by the name Otsutsuki. Dansum grunted and sat down. "How can we trait this person? He could as well be a spy for our enemies, Orochimaru, I or any of the rest of the Great Five, and you simply give him a headband and call that George." "Listen," Hiruzen began. "He is trait-worthy, he was an orphan, by the way he is 16. Hiruzen finished. "Now, no more discussion about this, we have more important things to discuss, like genin team placements." Hiruzen told them and reclined. "I have an idea, Hokage-sama," Hiashi said. "I assume this Kurama person is a genin." A nod. "That means there is an extra 2 genin, all I care about is placing my daughter on Naruto's team," Hiashi said with a smirk. "That is not possible, Team 1 will be," Hiruzen began, and minutes later. "Team 7 will be Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno and Sai, Kakashi will sensei that team, Team 8 will be Hinata Hikta, Shino Aburam and Kiba Inuzuka with Kurenai in charge, Team 9 is still up and running, so Team 10, which will be led by my son Asuma, will be the new Ino Shikacho formation, and Team 11 will be Naruto and Kurama, led by former Anbu Captain Yamato," he said and took in a deep breath. But Hiashi began only to be silenced by a glare from Hiruzen. "What do you mean, former Anbu Captain?" Dansum asked. "I shall remove him for the sole purpose of training Naruto, and if Kurama is to go berserk despite only having 3 tails of demonic chakra, Yamato proficiency in Mokuton can help," Hiruzen explained, and everyone became quiet. Now, to address other matters. Later. Naruto's den, Konohagakure. Naruto sat in his den with Ino on his lap fast asleep. He was reading the book left by Hashirama Senju and was nearing the end, but something about the book was off, but he didn't study it all that much. As he turned the page, he stumbled on something he immediately became interested in. The origins of both the Senju and Uchiha clans come from the days of war. The Senju were against the Uchiha, and one day Hashirama Senju met Madara Uchiha. Both were older brothers and the sons of the leader of their respective clans. Hashirama was the older brother of 3 others, and Madara was the older brother of 4 others. Being born in the warring periods of the Senju and Uchiha was difficult for Hashirama and Madara. Hashirama had met Madara one day while skipping rocks, they had developed a friendly rivalry. In the end, however, Hashirama would always win their contests. While they would play and compete, neither knew the real identity of the other. One day when one of their younger brothers had ended up killing each other was when they had found out about the other's true identity. Hashirama was a Senju and Madara was an Uchiha. They grew up and fought against each other, they had dreams together, and in the end they completed their dreams. They built a ninja village where children wouldn't be sent to war and die. A village where everyone was treated with respect and integrity. They built Konohagakure no Sado. Naruto closed the book as he finished reading that sentence. He placed the book down on the desk and watched the sleeping Ba in his arms. It was too late to carry her home, and she could go by herself had she been awake. It was 12 o'clock in the morning. With a sigh he stood and fixed her in his arms, so she was being carried bridal style. Kissing her on her forehead he walked towards the door and turned the handle. He stopped and looked back at the book. He shook his head sadly and walked up the stairs of the house. Instead of placing her in a spare bedroom, Naruto carried her into his room and placed her on his bed. He quickly stripped off his clothes and remained in only his boxers. He climbed in bed next to her, he wrapped a hand around her waist, and his hand rested in her stomach. He then blushed as he realized he was spooning her. "What are you doing?" He heard a soft voice ask and almost jumped out of the bed. He leaned into her hair and sighed. She took one of her feet and rested it on his. "Just relaxing, I just finished reading for the night and it was too late to carry you home, so I decided to let you sleep here." Naruto explained with a blush on his face. "That still doesn't explain why I am in your bed or why you're spooning me." She teased him, making him blush and bury his face into her soft hair. He sniffed. "Vanilla." Naruto curled over her so he was now facing her and she was facing him. They looked into each other's eyes and got lost. Coming out of his daze, Naruto smiled softly as he leaned in and captured her lips in a kiss. Naruto slid his hand in her waist and she slipped his hand on her cheek. Pulling apart, Naruto smirked. He kissed Ino full on the lips one more time and closed his eyes. "Good night, Naru-kun," Ino said. "Good night, Ino-chan," Naruto said. They kissed once more before finding themselves asleep and in dreamland. Wasn't life great? For now. Following morning. Senju compound, Konohagakure. But the grown Ino wake up with her head on something warm and something that was beating. Opened her eyes, she saw surroundings that weren't those of her room. Then the events of the night came back to her and she smiled but blushed at the same time. It was then that she looked over Naruto's body to see that he was in his boxers and she saw his morning wood. Looking down at herself, she found that she was also in her underwear. Dark purple lace panties and a dark purple lace bra that hugged her 32C size breast perfectly. She had took of her clothes in the middle of the night. She had a flat but slightly toned stomach and a slightly above average rear. Glancing back at Naruto's wood, she began to feel hot and bothered just by looking at it and she groaned and got up. "What got you panties in a bunch?" She heard Naruto ask and turned around to meet his body under the covers and him curled up like a little ball. "I'm in my bra and panty, don't look," she said, trying to cover herself up but to no avail, and Naruto chuckled. "What's so funny?" she asked hotly and Naruto shrugged and closed his eyes. "You might want to go and bathe and change, I'll leave so you can handle your stories," Naruto said as he got up and threw on his pants. "Are you saying I smell funny, Naru-kun?" she asked sweetly. "I didn't say that, did I?" he asked mockingly and she glared. "All I'm saying is that you should take a shower and change, I can literally smell the pheromones coming off of you." He finished and left the room, but not before giving her a quick kiss. "Pervert." She screamed back at him and then crossed her arms under her breast. "Damn no good boyfriend," she mumbled under her breath as she took up one of her scrolls and unsealed some clothes, a toothbrush and a towel. She placed the towel on her shoulder and took the clothes and toothbrush in her hand. With a grumble and at the door to which her boyfriend left, she entered the bathroom and locked the door behind her. Earlier. Naruto's den, Konohagakure. Naruto entered the den dressed in his ninja gear. After leaving an embarrassed Ino, he went and took a bath and changed into his shinobi attire, and here he was now. Walking to the desk, he picked up his book on Hashirama and opened it. As he read the contents, it simply covered everything about the Senju and Uchiha, but it was the origins of the clans that had Naruto interested. The Senju clan originated from Asura Otsutsuki, the younger son of the Rikiden Sennin. It was due to Asura's special chakra he received from his father that enabled the Senju to utilize the Mokuton wood release. The Uchiha clan originated from Indra Otsutsuki, the older son of the Rikiden Sennin. It was due to Indra's special chakra he received from his father that enabled the Uchiha to utilize the Sharingan Eye. Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the Rikiden Sennin, was the first ever Jinchuriki. He was the host of the Jaiwubi, the 10 tails. Its origins are unknown, but what is known is that Hagoromo divided the chakra into 9 parts and thus the birth of the 9-tailed beast came. Also, if a Senju is to conceive a child with an Uchiha, that child could become the next Rikiden Sennin because the Rinnegan Kekkei Genkai of the Sage of 6 Paths is formed when the DNA of a Senju and an Uchiha. As Hagoromo was the creator of Bijk, anyone of his blood can control them. That is why both Senju and Uchiha can control Bijk. All of these things are known as I met the Rikiden Sennin in a dream and he told me these things. It was said that the person who reads this after me shall become a shinobi to change the world. Hashirama Senju. Shadai Hokage, Nidaime Kami no Shinobi. That was it. As Naruto finished the last of the book, a pain shot through his hand. His right hand. From wrist to shoulder, his serpent tattoo began to glow, and then it died down. This must be the extra effective Yozo no Ringu Naila told me about the day before last. He thought, remembering a conversation with the elder Uzumaki the day before last. 5 small pillars shot up around Naruto just as Ino and Kurama entered. Ino was about to rush towards Naruto, but was stopped by Kurama, who shook his head. She wanted to protest, but the next thing that happened was simply mystifying. The top of each pillar did something. Black fire came out of the first, spiraling wind could be vaguely seen in the second, the third had blue lightning at the top, the fourth had a piece of dirt with grass on it, and the last was water, only it was dancing around. The added effect of Yozo no Ringu, change of chakra. Kurama informed, and the pillars returned to the ground from whence it came. Your Kaiten is black, Fton is spiraling wind, Raiten is blue, Doten has grass or nature if you will on it, and Suiton just looks pretty. Kurama finished with a chuckle. Naruto glared at the fox as he held up the Shodai's book and bursted into black flames. The flames died down in his hand, shortly after not leaving a single burn. Naruto let out a sigh and walked towards his best friend and girlfriend. He walked past them and told them he was going to train. Ino looked concerned, but Kurama waved it off. Nothing is wrong with him except he might go emo on us. Kurama warned. Why's that? Ino asked. Another added effect of Yozo no Ringu allows the user to remember things from when he or she was even a baby. The only thing is that no one knows when it will happen. Kurama explained. Everything? Even his abuse and other things? She asked, remembering Naruto's story about his abuse, verbally, physically, mentally and emotionally. Yes, however. Kurama stated. However what? She asked. The thing that has him like that is, Kurama said but didn't finish. He turned towards the door where Naruto left and shook his head slowly. Ino stepped right in front of him. What? Is it? She asked angrily. Kurama sighed, women were so annoying. He looked back at the ashes of Hashirama's book and sighed again. He walked over to where the intrusion in the ground had occurred from the pillars and using his Doten manipulation, he fixed the ground. He could use Kaiten and Doten, so this wasn't surprising to Ino, but what was that he hasn't answered her question, yet making her think that it was wow thing bad. Kurama. He looked at her and sat down in Naruto's chair. He beckoned for her to come closer. When she did, he sighed. He looked at a picture of Hashirama and Madara on the wall, once with Tsunade with a swollen belly, and lastly one with Minato on his inauguration as Hokage. He pointed towards the picture of Minato. He had shared a mind link with Naruto and knew exactly what had the young blonde so upset, and truthfully he couldn't blame him. He found out who his father was. What if Naruto has senju and Uzumaki clan bloodline? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.